Oh, this should be interesting.
The kids are coming. Maybe it's for their government class.
Mm-hmm.
They like
Yeah.
to come when the meetings are like to happen.
Summer school. I don't know.
Didn't get lucky today.
Must be
but-
summer school. No, well, that's what I think.
There's not that many people in the audience.
Nothing. Yeah, right there.
That's, I think, Jack Kirk. He's an opponent. That's LNG, I think. One or two other people.
The name tags are for the board, so you want to
Yeah,
take your,
makes
put
sense,
your,
actually.
the name tag down there for the board. They've got the board. Oh, yes, I don't want to be on there.
I have one of those from Florida. I could just
Get those little hello things that they use.
No, I have a commissioner one year. I was a commissioner, so it's perfect.
Yeah, oh, that's right, I've got mine from last time.
I didn't want to give planning and public works to one person.
Everybody's ready.
Geez, I just made it again.
I'll call this planning commission meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the salute? Ray, you want to lead us?
Ready, salute.
To the flag
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening, and I would like to encourage anyone that would like to speak to the Planning Commission, to give input, to fill out a speaker's card, please. Okay. We'll move on then. Oh, I will move on first to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make any announcements or talk to the Planning Commission about any item not on the agenda? Okay, I'll close public comment, and then I'll go back. Are there any staff announcements? There's no staff announcements. All right, well then let's move on to the consent calendar. Does anyone have any questions on the consent calendar, or I'll accept a motion to approve it?
I move we approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's move on then to the regular agenda. I am going to move the second item to the first place and then move the first item to the second place. So I'm just going to flip the agendas. Okay, and so I'm going to open the public hearing on the personal cultivation cannabis ordinance amendment, chapter 11.15 of the San Benito County Code. And this is proposed by the ad hoc committee. So I will open the public hearing, and do we have a staff report?
Victor, are you going to do a staff report on this one?
Thank you, Barb. So we don't have a formal presentation for the...
I'm sorry, Victor, will you introduce yourself?
Sorry, Victor Gomez with Pinnacle Strategy Consultant with San Benito County for cannabis issues. So the ad hoc committee, I met individually with the Board of Supervisors, worked with County Council and Sarah Dickinson from our staff, from County Council staff as well, on any proposed changes and modifications made to the personal use ordinance. So as you folks know, this ordinance would allow, or does allow, essentially 6 plants per residence whether interior or exterior growth within a parcel for one user. And so there were some minor changes to the ordinance, but really I don't have a presentation here today to address specific issues, but I can certainly answer any questions that you may have.
I've got a quick one.
All right.
Short of the last presentation, have you talked to any of the planning commissioners individually about this?
I have not, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, all right. I will open it up to the public now. Our clerk has temporarily stepped away,
Oh, that's
so if
okay.
you'll just introduce
I'm
yourself.
going to give her another one later, so.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Steve Becerra. I'm a San Benito County resident, and you heard me speak in front of you before. And I think Planning Commissioner Pierce hit the nail right on the head. Obviously, this particular ordinance regarding personal growth, we're talking about recreational marijuana here, personal growth of 6 plants or less. And it sounds like this ordinance hasn't really been vetted out to not only staff and council committee members, but also stakeholders, including the public, people that live here in this county. And the ordinance is very specific, and it goes against something I've heard some of the board of supervisors say over and over again: no outdoor grows. No outdoor grows. Well, this particular, and I'm all for somebody who wants to grow their 6 plants in their for medical use or for recreational use in their 6 plants per parcel. But these plants should be grown indoors. They should be grown out of sight, because what you're going to do is invite, and you're going to be not only inviting some neighborhood issues in residential areas like Sunnyside Village or wherever, but you're also going to invite the criminal element to come and steal these plants. And I've said it before, these plants are not 6 feet tall. They're 12 feet tall or taller, 8 feet wide sometimes. And if you allow them to be grown outdoors, it could be an issue. Smell, crime, other things. It's I think, apparent to me why they may want to do this, because if you read Prop 64, it's very clear that if you do not allow outdoor grow of recreational marijuana, 6 plants or less, and you do not allow retail sales of recreational marijuana in your jurisdiction, you will not be able to get grant money in relation to reimbursement for fire, police, and other areas. It's the double-edged sword of the law. They put it in on us. So if you don't participate with allowing outdoor growth for personal use, or you don't allow retail sales operations in your jurisdiction, you are not eligible for that grant money. That portion of the grant money deals with fire and police. It's right in the law. So if that's the motivation of the board, then I get it. But I think there's many other jurisdictions throughout the state that have banned outdoor growing of recreational marijuana. It should be indoors, and I know there's issues too with indoor grows, electricity and stuff like that, and code enforcement, but that's where it belongs. That's what the intent of the law was, with the caveat of, ultimately, if you don't allow outdoor grows, or if you don't allow recreational sales, retail sales in your jurisdiction, you don't get a piece of that pie. So, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Smith. I just wanted to bring up a few points here. Cannabis cultivation, believe it also, like it was said by the last speaker, it should be restricted to indoors and filtered in industrial areas. I personally have lived next to one of these grow operations for the last couple years. It's been very tough for us. The smell is immense. The crime, the risk, the worrying about people, us getting robbed because there's a target of burglary right next to us. It draws crime into the neighborhood. So I believe that this type of a facility should be, it should be in a tilt-up building. It should be inside an industrial area. I think there was a suggestion that perhaps it could go in the medical area, like be zoned in an area that's like where like the medical lab rats are in our area. And I think it would have less impact on neighborhoods. I definitely don't think this should be next to, it's a commercial, if it's a commercial cultivation, it shouldn't be allowed next to areas, properties with residences. I don't think it should be on, if it's going to be indoors where it's safe, safer from being robbed, then it shouldn't be taking up our precious prime agricultural farmland either. It should be in an area, like I said, commercial area, non-agricultural industrial area. The other thing is, like I said, the smells associated with marijuana plants and the crime they attract are a nuisance to neighborhoods. The immense water that they draw threatens and damages shared wells. We've had our shared well motor burn out more than once because of the draw that's coming from the pot farm next door. So definitely urge you to not allow it. I know that we've been talking to the Board of Supervisors about that, but I believe zoning it out of the areas where there are residences and into a more appropriate area like a industrial or commercial area would be more appropriate. And also, I just wanted to mention that I feel it's not compatible with our 2035 general plan, in that it's a business, or it's a crop that's not protected under a right to farm protections in California. The cannabis crops are a very smelly crop and not compatible with the wineries and outdoor events that you would want to be promoting in this area or that are outlined in the general plan. So if you want to replace all of that dream of having an area where people come, it's a tourist attraction where people are coming to spend outdoors at wineries and outdoor events, replace that with a cannabis business as a new model for San Benito County, then I guess that's a path to go down, but I think it's something that you definitely need to realize is not compatible. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
A question for the speaker through the chair.
Okay. Excuse me, we have a planning commission that would like to ask you a question. Okay.
The grow operation you were next to,
Yeah.
approximately any guess about the number of plants that might have been involved?
Thousands. There are thousands. And last year there were two different operations. One that had the property was raided, and there was someone who was a fugitive that was staying there and that was taken away. So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we're subjected to. We've put a lot of money into turning our property from a blighted property into a really nice place that, is got a, vineyard, and hopefully will be bringing in revenue for the area in another year or two. So it's
Thank you.
unfortunate. Thank you.
Janet, do you have any speaker cards? Okay.
So I'm Jack Kirk, and been in the North County for about 30 years, and over on Flint Road for 3 years. So I've been around here. I guess I'm still a newcomer, 33 years. Raised my kids here. Go Hay Baylors. But and tonight, part of my legacy in the North County is I've had a lot of parties and stuff for kids in my home. No smoking, no kissing, and no alcohol, and definitely no marijuana. And I got 18 young ladies at my house right now with my wife and some leaders, and they're all swimming in our pool, and we spent the day getting that ready. I like to protect that. And when you talk about having this personal use memo and ordinance and allowing it to be my neighbor next door or whatever to grow 6 plants next to my property where I farm about 20 tons of apricots a year, I would take offense to that. I think you're going to create a situation where you got a lot of problems between neighbors with outdoor growths. I think this is your guys' legacy. This is a legacy issue for the Planning Commission, for our county supervisors, and you're going to affect years to come, how you guys treat this. So it was interesting. I don't know how long this has been, this ordinance item number 2 has been given to you guys, but I've been trying to work with Mark Medina, who's worked a lot. We have a community organization that has been studying these and sitting down and going through them, trying to give suggestions. A lot of supervisors, but I received this last night, and I don't have an intelligent rebate or come back to you yet because I'm sitting here trying to read it because I've been involved in business today. So maybe perhaps this could be delayed for now, accepting this, so that some of the people in the community could help read through it and give you some intelligent input, and I appreciate that. But I think, having it indoor, as Steve says, is the best thing. I know there could be some safety issues with people with wiring and lighting and things, but if those things were properly, if they were licensed to have it indoor with their medical marijuana permit, and their whatever they were going to build into an outbuilding or in their house was properly inspected, and lighting and water, and I think things could be done properly than just saying, well, we've got to protect them by throwing it outside now, and have the smell and everything affect everybody around. I know that if it started growing, and I use a thing, my wife's 5'2" and I'm 6'2", there's two different sizes. You can say a marijuana plant, you can have a 5'2" plant. I've been up in the dispensaries up in San Jose, they're about 4 foot inside, where you can have a 16, 18-foot plant. So which ones are you going to allow to grow in those yards outside? And there's going to be a lot of smell in the air, and when you allow those big plants, especially in the agricultural areas. I'm going to talk later, but we built 5-acre parcels. That's been our thing on the east side of Fairview Road, and I think you guys need to protect those. Those are our home sites. The people from San Jose, Salinas, these attorneys, they all seen it. At 5 acres, you can have 4 or 5 licensed, 22,000 square foot greenhouses there. Those are our homes. That's where we live, and I think you're going to see a lot of pushback from your constituency. Thank you. All respect. Is there any questions to me?
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Peter Brazil.
Good evening. My name is Peter Brazil. I'm an attorney with L&G representing multiple clients in San Benito County. I'll make this real quick, actually. We've gone over a couple of versions of this draft, and it's been amended. Part and parcel, basically, the draft ordinance you see before you is a good start for the county. It's had some significant changes that have gone through. I'd like to thank staff, the board, the ad hoc committee, Victor Gomez, and you, the Planning Commission, for taking your time to address this issue and to properly vet the ordinance itself. I, at this point, am just submitting to you that I think the ordinance is in a position where you can recommend it to the board as a good starting point. Will it not be amended in the future? We're doing the same thing in Monterey County. As you implement these policies, certain things will come up, and they're unique to each location. There will be changes you may make, but as it's currently drafted right now, for the most part, I think you have a pretty solid ordinance.
Thank you.
I'm going to get my glasses.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this issue? All right, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
Madam Chair, could I add a little bit of background on this ordinance as well?
All right.
Okay, this ordinance is largely tailored after the existing urgency ordinance, which was adopted September of 2016. That urgency ordinance had gone through a number of iterations, starting, I believe, in about 2015. Initially, the Board of Supervisors, when it had considered basically a ban on cultivation, except for a very limited number of plants, they had considered just allowing those limited number of plants to be grown indoors. And then when the urgency ordinance was adopted, it was allowed indoor or outdoor growth. I want the public and the Commission to realize that this is the ordinance which would provide the basic ban on marijuana, accepting 6 plants or less. Our current urgency ordinance expires, and it would have to be renewed, I believe, in September by a 4/5 vote of the Board of Supervisors, because it was adopted under an urgency ordinance, and it was only good for up to 1 year, because we already renewed it once for an additional 10 months, 15 days. And then it would have to come back, and to renew it for another year, it would require a 4/5 vote. So this ordinance is actually what will ban it, except as permitted by the other ordinance. But this is, if nothing else is adopted, this ordinance is the ordinance that, provides the basic framework for taking the place of the urgency ordinance. I just wanted the Commission to realize that.
Thank you, Barbara. Speaking as one commissioner, I think it's a very valid point that you've been working on this since September, and it's the first time the Planning Commission has seen it and the public. And I really believe, even if it's just put on the consent calendar to say, we're working on this, please contact us, if you have any input, just so everybody knows as we're going through the process what's happening. Now, is there planning commissioners who would like to speak? Jean, do you have anything? I'll start on this end tonight.
I always do, don't I? But, yeah, I have some concerns. I understand the difficult place we're in here as far as what's happened in the past and timing. I think the speakers probably could be joined by 20, 30, 40 different points of view. But there are valid points of view. I don't know why, because I wasn't part of that process, why the ordinance is like it is without some sort of descriptors and qualifying language. But it's too late to do that now, except to say no tonight, and we can do that. I think ultimately this is going to be a board decision, and our interest in this is, however, planning. And as was said by one of the speakers, the planning for years has been that you have a 5-acre home on a parcel in the country. And you can raise all kinds of vegetables and fruits, but, you know, the people do sometimes rely on the state of the law, even though laws change, and this is one of those instances. So I find it troubling. I think it needs some serious work. I agree that outside creates havoc potential that's much higher than inside. I guess one of my main concerns, and this is going to apply to the other ordinance too, is San Benito County has always been understaffed in almost everything it does. We don't have enough money to do the things we already have going. We never seem to get taxes passed. I'm wondering how we're going to fund all the fallout from these things. Because as a lawyer and a former judicial officer in this county, I'm very aware that there will be plenty of fallout, and that no matter what people intend, things go wrong. I'm also very aware that the courts are strapped for money too, and the fines are outrageously high. So some young person could get involved in this, and their parents would end up spending thousands of dollars to get them out. So I have a lot of concerns about it. At the same time, I think we have to comply with the law, and the supervisors are going to have to make that ultimate decision. I would like to see us fine-tune this a lot. I guess I'd like to approve it subject to some amendment procedures, either here or give it to the board if we pass it, on condition that there be serious consideration of some of the areas of concern.
Thank you, Jean. Mark, did you?
Well, a little bit quickly, one gentleman said that
Oh, Mike, is it on?
he said that the 5-acre parcels are home parcels. That's not the way they were divided. Those are supposed to be ag parcels. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, there's neighborhood deals. I mean, that's where this marijuana should be grown, to make ag use of those properties. All they are is big weed patches for the most part. They're not really well taken care of. You know, I mean, why go take prime land and take a half an acre out of there, put it on the 5-acre parcel? We got like 600 of them. We only got 50 permits, right? There's only going to be 50 permits at a half an acre, so there's only 25 acres in total. But I think if this thing was orchestrated correctly, I think it's better to focus on them, which is supposed to be ag, instead of, the wherever, or putting in the middle of a prime ag land. I just think it's a lot better way to situate it and give those guys a chance to make a nickel in agriculture like they're supposed to be doing.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just
Robert.
respond to that a minute? Just for clarification, because I agree with you in terms of the commercial stuff, but we're talking here about the ordinance for the 6 plants only person. That's a different thing, I think, from the big one. And I have a 5-acre parcel too, and it is a weed patch. So I get your concern. But I think we have to differentiate these two ordinances. And if this is 6 plants for a single person, that's not the same thing. Has all the other parameters of possible dangers and costs, but in terms of volume, it doesn't.
The personal use, the 6 plants, that's already legal at the state level, no?
That's correct.
This is our local
I
ordinance.
understand that, but I mean, it's legal to do it in the state now.
Right, it's legal for, yeah.
I mean, what's to preclude them to doing it here? Now.
This is but this is.
Now,
the
I understand
county.
we're putting this into place.
Right.
I'm asking you, what's to stop them to have 6 plants now?
Nothing.
Nothing.
In
That's
fact,
why we're
that's why
trying.
we're doing this ordinance, so we have control, the county has some control over it.
Yeah. The other thing, point, and if I brought it up last time, but, I think that not allowing outdoor growing in certain areas totally is the wrong approach. I would maintain that there's parcels that you can't get to you could go anywhere you want, but the practical matter is, if it's 2 miles off the road, there's not much security issues going on. And why can't they they could do it more economically if it was raised in the open. So, I think that I mentioned to the council, and, it's just a thought I had, but I think that, they could do a lot more economic. Like I said, they got to build this greenhouse with all the fans and lights and all the, and then you can't put too many lights because you're messing with the dark skies, and there's a lot of considerations. But you don't think the outdoor, they don't do lights, right? So you don't have that dark skies issue. Just another thought. I'm sure I'll have more to say later. At any rate.
Madam Chair, is it okay if I provide some clarification on what we're doing right now? So,
go ahead.
so just really quick on those points. We are reviewing the personal component. We're not dealing with commercial, as was clarified by the commissioner as well. So you do have options when it comes to personal cultivation, as was mentioned by a few of the speakers. And what this ordinance essentially does is, as your county council mentioned, you can legally grow more than 6 plants as a collective. You can grow more than 6 if you're acting as a collective, if it's allowed. What this is focused on personal cultivation. You're absolutely correct. Adult use does allow you to have 6 plants as an individual. Collectively, even if you have multiple individuals, you can only have 6 plants per premises. But what this ordinance actually does is it does allow, you're correct, it does allow 6 plants for outdoor cultivation. You can, or at least the Board of Supervisors as the legislative body does have the authority to ban outdoor growth for personal cultivation, requiring anybody using cannabis for personal reasons to grow it indoors. Now, within your ordinance is the framework regarding the codes that they have to meet, the registration, and I'm talking personal here, again, nothing to do with commercial. They do have to register, which isn't necessarily a standard in other counties and other jurisdictions. So what the board is giving us direction to present to you tonight is also a registration component, where if you do want to grow, you do have to register through the RMA's office your cultivation, potentially pay a fee. That language is written in here, and the County Board of Supervisors would have the authority to put a fee in place to collect, to permit your grow in unincorporated areas of San Benito County. Also, for consistency's sake, this ordinance, this personal use ordinance, is very consistent with what you're going to be looking at next, and that's your cannabis, commercial cannabis ordinance or business cannabis ordinance that is very consistent with the setbacks, very consistent with those types of requirements that are built into the commercial component of it. Now, I will say this, in addition to that, at any time, and I know you folks do have some questions, we certainly weren't trying to blindside you with this ordinance, so you may feel that way. I'm open to a phone call anytime. I've never turned away from a phone call or an email or anything from any commissioner. So feel free at any time to get a hold of me if you have any questions on any of these ordinances. I know Commissioner Rodriguez has done so, and I truly appreciate that feedback. That was very good feedback. Commissioner, thank you so much for reaching out. But if the other 4 commissioners have any questions on the ordinance or on the other proposed ordinance, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need clarification on any of this stuff. That's what we're here for.
Thank you, Victor.
I have a question for Chair. The problem is we didn't know this was going on. You can't reach out to something that you don't know that's going on. The other part of it is, too, if you're reaching out to stakeholders and all other groups, and you're expecting to bring this in front of us, just as a matter of professional courtesy, it would have been a really good job to give us a call. Let us know what was going on. Give us some of the early drafts. The stuff I got was from Barbara. Thank you, Barbara, doing her job. But it takes, this is a complex issue. And, this is not lettuce we're talking about here, okay? People don't shoot people for lettuce heads, or tomatoes and stuff like this. There's a whole pack of issues with this that come along with this that can't just be decided perusing through this in a few days.
I'm here open to any suggestions. So one thing that would be helpful to me, Commissioner Pierce, is if you give me constructive feedback. So I understand the overall opposition to, it seems to me that there may be some just opposition to cannabis in general, okay? We're here to present to you the land use component of this ordinance, of this one and the one you're going to hear in just a few minutes. So what would be helpful to me to take back to hearing from you at the last meeting and at this meeting today is really constructive feedback on changes, specific changes that you want. I understand that this ordinance and the next one are probably not perfect. So we're here to try to fix them as much as possible. So what would be helpful for me as you guys open up your dialogue amongst yourselves is to provide me and County Council specific feedback on those specific changes you want to the ordinances. That would be helpful to me. So thank you.
I think you're going to get that.
I got a question. So, what's the need to regulate and register the private deal when it's in the state law that they can do it already? And then you're going to end up putting more laws in place, what we're talking about, with nobody to enforce them. So,
I think
what's the point?
One of the points that is addressed by that is it does require, I believe, to have landowner consent, the owner's consent. So it prevents, one thing that it does is it prevents tenants from growing the marijuana without the property owner's knowledge. So that, because some houses have been destroyed by growing marijuana inside without the landlord's knowledge. And it also allows the opportunity to make sure that it complies with building codes and et cetera, because that way they make sure that there's adequate electricity. Those are a couple of the issues that are addressed.
Now, does all the other counties do this? I mean,
I'll ask Victor. I'll ask Victor whether he knows how many other counties have some sort of permit or registration process.
So there's actually a lot. There's quite a bit of at least cities. Counties a little bit different, but there's actually quite a bit of cities that have done a couple of things that have banned outdoor growth. So they do allow, they did end up taking action to ban outdoor growth for adult use, right? Some cities have implemented a registration, a mandatory registration for personal cultivation as well. Now, I do understand that some, and maybe Peter and some other attorneys that are here may know this, but from what I understand, some of the registration requirements were challenged, I think, in one or two municipalities. I'm not sure what ended up happening with those, but there were concerns with privacy issues, with having to register. If it's already allowed by the state, should we force a resident to register even though it's allowed by the state, and the state doesn't require a registration?
My question.
But so yeah, you're right, Commissioner. It's not a requirement by the state. But it is in this ordinance, it is being proposed to be a new requirement, an additional requirement.
Yeah, but you're talking about restrictions and registration in municipalities, and you said the counties are different. Why does this county have to be like a municipality?
It doesn't. That's up to the legislative body on what they want to do there. it's their decision if they really want to move forward with it.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Even if this ordinance didn't get passed, just say for some reason, you can still grow it legally in the state of California, and you can bring lawsuits against the county. Am I correct?
I'm not going to answer that last question about lawsuits, but I will say that it is currently allowed to have six
So
plants.
we're just trying to make something more clear, more simpler. And it complies with the state regulations and state law, correct?
Yes.
So,
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Commissioner Rodriguez, I missed the point. What you're basically saying is that
if this
it's-
ordinance didn't pass, you can still legally grow it.
I see.
And if the county try to do something, you can legally find something to go against the county,
Okay.
legally.
So in other words, if we didn't have an ordinance on the books.
You can still grow it legally, because the state law permits it.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
So to piggyback on that a little bit, so in real estate, most restrictive applies. So is this the same also, I guess this is civil criminal, but, so we have the state ordinance, we don't have an ordinance in play. We kick this in, and it's more restrictive, so that actually is able to pare down some of the state.
The state law indicates that you could reasonably regulate it, but that you cannot, totally ban cultivation of less than 6 plants indoors.
Okay.
Or else, I think also in an enclosed structure outdoors, like a totally enclosed structure, accessory structure.
So if we wanted to go in and say, okay, 6 plants is fine per house, indoors only, then that doesn't conflict with state law. But can we go and just actually go in the state's face and say, we ban this, period?
I would not recommend that.
I know, it's just a hypothetical, okay? It's a learning situation here for at least this commissioner. So if the state law comes down and says, okay, you can do this, and we come in our county and say, we just want to be a dry county, can we actually ban this without getting it in the state's face?
You cannot ban it less than 6 plants indoors. That must be allowed indoors or an accessory structure. So that's like beyond the purview of the county to ban that.
Right. So then how does that work where the state allows this and the federals don't?
That's an interesting question, but
Kind of thought so. I was leading up to that.
Yeah.
So it's like,
But,
if we can't do this, then how can the
there's a-
state actually go against federal law and say, yeah, you can?
there's a lot of legislation pending at the federal law, and there's also been some court cases interpreting, the enforcement ability of the feds. They've kind of limited their enforcement ability through the Budget Act.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and also there's some legislation that's pending, and we'll see how it succeeds to. One of the legislation pieces that I thought had the most promise of succeeding, and I don't know whether it's gone anywhere yet, is to defer to the individual states to make that determination.
Okay. Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah.
You're always a big help. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Supervisor Rodriguez, do you have?
I know, I said regardless if it gets banned or not, it's still going to be grown by someone. And I know last week they had a meeting in Oakland, and the ex-president from Mexico, Vicente Fox, was speaking it, and they nationalized marijuana in Mexico and in Canada. So now Canada and Mexico want to make it allowable for the U.S. to be in NAFTA so they can market the whole market. And the biggest consumer for any type of illegal drugs or marijuana is right here, America. So either they're going to bring it in or we're going to grow it here. It's going to happen. And we've seen it through history. And a lot of cities have been built on drug money because it was illegal.
I just want to reiterate, I guess, what our speaker said here, who's been working on this stuff, that this is trying to do some fine-tuning on the part of the county to make it safer, I think, and make it less burdensome on some people. But there's such a big limitation in that there's no way the county can override the state. That if we attempt to do anything like this, or more limiting yet than what we've already got here, I think I'm thinking like a lawyer here again, and I could be wrong because we don't know how it's all going to play out at appellate levels, but we're going to put the county in a position where it could be named as a party that's interfering with citizens' rights, and we could broaden our liability rather than lessen it, potentially, depending on how these fact situations come up and who's doing what. I mean, the fact that we don't do anything, in my mind, is negligent without at least thinking about, can we improve this situation? Because there's clearly going to be, initially, and I don't think it'll be forever, just like with alcohol, people just finally accept how things are and get by it, and we go on and do other things, and it's not a big deal. But right now it's a big deal, and there's people, so many people in this county who are underemployed, who need things, who need money, and it's going to be an opportunity for crime. There's just no way around it. So my concern, again, is criminal enforcement, because I don't want to clog up the courts. I don't want to overwhelm our people. And there's no way in these private situations where you can bill them, in the sense that in the big ordinance that we're going to talk, the commercial one, they're going to pay a lot of money up front, so we can hire people to offset that cost. But here, we don't have that opportunity. So we're getting in the middle without much gain that I can see. We're not going to satisfy the people like the speaker here who thinks of his 5 acres as a home, which has got his, he feels safe there, and if people are doing pot next door, rightly or wrongly, he might feel less safe. And he might be less safe. We don't know. I'm disinclined to do it, bottom line. I think what I would like to do is recommend to the supervisors that in a land use sense, there's no big issue here. I mean, it's a legitimate land use, but to put all these parameters around it is their job to decide how they're going to pay for it. How are you going to pay for this if you're going to add all these restrictions?
I have just a couple questions on the ordinance itself. The first one, I guess, is I do agree with the speakers that have said that they believe it should be indoors. I believe it should be indoors. I believe that will lessen the criminal element. I don't believe in the plants being out in a yard where people can break in and, that's my feeling on that. But then under the nuisance abatement authority, 11.15.050, on number A, the way I read that, Victor, it sounds like somebody can just come up to my door and knock on the door and show me a badge and say that they want to inspect my house for illegal plants? Is that?
Where are we at? 150?
Yes.
What number is it?
Page 11.
Number A, page 11. 11.15.050.
Top of the page.
Mm-hmm.
Does the public have what we're looking at?
I don't know if
Yeah,
they have.
there's-
So,
Be copies in the back, too.
I was just thinking that we ought to, if we're going to talk about that in depth, we ought to read the paragraph out, but
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to do with it.
So, Commissioner, to answer your question, so under nuisance abatement authority, if you actually flip back to page 6, under item J, it does have your definition of enforcement officer. That may help clarify.
Right, no, I understand that.
Okay.
I'm saying without a court order, are we saying in this ordinance that somebody can knock on the door, identify themselves, show me a badge, and say, I want to look in your house because we believe you have illegal?
I'll take it.
Thanks.
Sarah Dickinson in our office has worked on this. I believe that they could go ask to see, they may enter onto your property and they may ask to see to enter into your house upon the showing of credentials. If that person refuses to let them in, then that enforcing officer would probably go get a warrant to enter unless there are some exigent circumstances. Our customary practice would not be not to force our way into the entry of the house, but the person could come ask and say, I'm here to inspect this property, and then go in there. But if the person refused, our typical response would be to get an inspection warrant.
So what about probable cause?
You're entering on with the permission, plus they've
So
already
you open
entered.
the door, the door comes open, you see about 20 plants in there.
Mm-hmm.
Probable cause, right? You can enter. Law enforcement can take action
Not
upon
law-
probable cause. No?
This
I
is
don't-
not a criminal
yeah.
situation, and they can't, without a warrant, do anything other than observe it and go get a warrant.
Yeah, I'm sure that these sections were taken from other counties also. Like, this is standard language, I believe, from lots of different code enforcement ordinances. It has similar languages to this. It basically gives the authority for the officer to go to the site and inspect the property, but if the person refuses, then, then you'd have to follow up with that.
Should be taken care of by then. Okay, so this is just a code enforcement officer. This is not a law enforcement officer.
Let's look at the definition, because often it includes law enforcement as well. Let's see.
Okay.
Victor, can I ask Victor a question? The wording in all these technical sections, was this something pondered over and drafted and revised in our county, or is it something that we've kind of taken samples of from various other places which have enacted these things and thought it worked pretty well? I mean, just how deeply have we looked at this?
So I hate to say this, but Sarah actually did a lot of the detailed work on this, and Sarah actually had background in from the county she came from on the code enforcement component of it, if I'm not mistaken,
Right.
Barb, and she had quite a bit of experience on the nuisance component of it and all that. So
I believe she was engaged in approximately 900 enforcement actions in Tehama County. So she had quite a bit of experience with code enforcement, and she did look at several ordinances and based it upon the Tehama County, some of the sections that she's been revising. In addition to this, there's going to be revisions to our hearing. We're going to revise our code enforcement ordinance to streamline it, and we're also going to bring forth an ordinance shortly regarding a hearing officer to expedite the process. And so she's looked at both our code enforcement ordinance, which hasn't been updated for a long time, and she's basing this upon other counties that have already drafted ordinances, and she's looked at several samples. But that's on the code enforcement aspect of it. The content of it, about whether it's allowed indoors or outdoors, was based upon our existing ordinance and the decisions that were made by the board back in 2016. And I do note that the enforcing officer shall mean in addition to the resource management agency director, it's the building official, building inspector, health officer, or sheriff, ag commissioner, their designated deputy. So you got a variety of enforcing officers that could enforce the ordinance.
I'd like to say one other thing, just as a suggestion to move forward, because we thought this would be a little guy, and it's taken a lot of time. If we do anything, I guess in terms of a motion to send it back to with approval, I would like to recommend that if the supervisors decide to enact this ordinance or a revised version that they may come up with, that they limit it to indoor growth if we're going to do anything at all. That's the only thing I can hear consensus on here for that six plant thing. Otherwise, I just leave it alone and let state law be state law so we don't get in the middle of a lawsuit. That's all I would say.
And you're fine with the registration portion of it?
I don't think that's outrageous. I do think, because there are likely to be incidents here, that having people's names and something to hold on to, saying you consented to this, you created this, you own it, that would be a good idea.
Okay.
But I don't think it's necessary. But I don't see any lawsuits coming out of that. That's so neutral.
Is there any other comments from any other commissioners, or?
No.
No? Did you want to make a motion then, Jean?
I don't want to move to approve it, no.
Oh, all
I
right.
would just condition the approval if that's where we're going to. If somebody else makes that motion, I would like to make that amendment. Oh, sorry. I was saying that I don't want to make a motion to approve it, but if someone makes that motion, I would like to add a condition, which I just described, which was to limit the growth to inside.
Could just for clarity purposes, could we get at least a polling of the commission whether they would like me to propose some language onto that point? Because I could add some language if the commission would like that language to the resolution as section number 6.
Okay. We can certainly do that. How does the rest of the commission feel about limiting it to indoor growth? Mark?
okay? This is for the 6. But the state law doesn't say that. They can outdoor, whatever.
I thought Victor said that state law says you can grow it indoors. That's part of the
It
state law.
empowers us to do it.
The
as I understood
state
part
law
of it.
says we cannot restrict it from growing indoors or in an enclosed accessory structure, so that we could limit it from being grown outdoors if the county would like.
But it can be grown in an accessory outdoors, a greenhouse. Okay.
So we're kind of in consensus of that, too?
If it will, so Barbara can draft the language if that's what
Okay.
the commission wants. There's no sense in drafting language and.
Exactly. So to add on to that, because I think we have consensus on that, I think I'd like to give the code enforcement and the county a little more teeth in it, and I think the $1,000 a day administrative penalty should be more like $5,000 a day. So if they really want to violate, they can pay for it. How do you guys feel about giving them some teeth so they can operate?
I think they just leave it like that.
Okay, that's one.
I think that would worsen the case that we were unduly interfering with state law and put us in a worse rap than we would be in otherwise. I'd leave it alone.
Yeah.
I think it's a money loser, absolutely, but that's state law.
And not everybody's going to grow. I mean, just like farming. Not everybody does farming. It's not an easy task. You really got to know a science to grow anything. I mean, not everybody's going to go plant a plant out there and just water it, things going to grow. He's going to need a lot of attention, like farming.
Yeah, but I see this as a moneymaker. I see this as an indoor crop that can be sold, and quite a bit of money can be made from that. And if that's the case, that encourages more criminal behavior of more than 6 plants. That means more criminal behavior, that means more administrative, that means it's going to take more time and effort, and they've got plenty of money to go ahead and violate and sell anyway if they really want to, and it's about intent. And it's been my experience in law enforcement that, this might help slow down the few, 1 or 10% that might actually try to do something like that. It could be more, actually, because...
But the enforcement...
But if I don't have consensus and you guys don't have the experience that I have, I can understand that. And if I don't have consensus, that's fine.
They're still, if they violate the law, they're going to get prosecuted. Throw the book at them. If you got 20 plants, you're supposed to have 6. You get caught, hey, take it to the extreme of the law. Let the law enforcement take care of that.
Yeah, just a question on that. I don't think we've drafted anything, nor am I suggesting we do, about consequences here.
Yeah.
That's going to be something that's going to come up on a case-by-case basis. And if there's 7 plants versus 6, I don't know what's going to happen. This is my inclination is to go slow on all this stuff and let other counties go through the ropes. But it's before us. We got to make a decision.
And that was the reason that we're changing our current code enforcement ordinance so that we streamline the process so that it's easier to place the administrative fines in a quicker process on the properties. It's going to be primarily civil enforcement of this ordinance, so we want to make sure the process is as streamlined as possible. Currently, the process for code enforcement is a little bit lengthier than it needs to be. So that's the reason that code enforcement ordinance is going to be changed.
Okay. So if they violate, can we, and we're registering, can we pull their registration, or is that against state law as well? Because now we're basically banning them, and you
I don't
told
know
me I
whether we
can't do
pull
that.
their registration or fine them repeatedly, until they comply. I mean, if we start really being proactive in the code enforcement, I think that we can gain compliance because, if you're really aggressive with code enforcement, you can get people to comply. You do the fines and place liens on the property.
That's right. That's right. So
To take that one step further, it says a $1,000 a day administrative penalty. When does the day start? Say they have 20 plants and they're 3 months matured. Does it start from day 1?
Usually that would be every day that you notice a violation.
Upon discovery?
So you wouldn't go back in time, assuming that it's 3 months old. Yeah. I mean, it would be you would just go out there and you notice it's a violation this day, and then it's a violation the next day until it's abated.
We kind of painted ourselves in the hole. Ready for a motion? Or you want to discuss some more?
No, I don't see any reason to. Are you ready to?
Anything else?
If the Planning Commission would like, and this is an option that the Planning Commission could include in its motion should it desire, Section 6 could read, the Planning Commission, and this is a new Section 6 in the ordinance, the resolution that was previously passed out, the Planning Commission further recommends that the Board of Supervisors consider limiting the cultivation to indoor growth.
Or in a greenhouse,
Yeah.
yes. Because the in-growth can be a house, a garage, but you have a greenhouse, it's also indoors.
Can I say enclosed accessory structure as contemplated by state law? Okay.
Anybody want to move that amendment?
Got it, Barbara?
You got it?
Can you read it back, please?
Going to make that.
Okay, the Planning Commission further recommends that the Board of Supervisors consider limiting the cultivation to indoor growth or an enclosed accessory structure as contemplated by state law.
Okay, a motion that we pass this ordinance back with approval to the Planning Commission or to the supervisors with the staff's recommendation and changes.
And that includes adopting the resolution as amended?
Yes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Okay, let's move on to public hearing on the draft cannibal business ordinance, adding Chapter 7.02 of San Benito County Code, proposed by the ad hoc committee and consultants. All right, now, do we have a staff report?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is essentially the draft ordinance that you reviewed last month. We took your feedback from this commission, shared that information with the ad hoc committee on those specific recommendations that you folks had made last month when we presented to you. Took those back to the ad hoc committee and allowed them to decide what they wanted to amend within the ordinance. So again, same ordinance you saw last month. I'll go through the simple changes that were made. If you have any questions on those proposed amendments or changes that are actually in the draft ordinance that's before you, please let me know.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this time?
No, not.
So again, these are the listed cultivation permits for San Benito County, listed here, consistent with state law. Permit limits is one thing that we certainly wanted to chat with you about. That is something that was brought up last month by this board, by this commission, and I think the commissioner had mentioned that in his previous comments just a few minutes ago as well, regarding the potential desire for prime ag preservation as well. So we did discuss that with the ad hoc committee members regarding a permit limit for potentially prime ag, which, as you'll see in a few minutes in the map, is the highlighted green area here. So we had that discussion with the ad hoc committee, and they certainly wanted to hear your feedback. There was a suggestion of potentially putting a limit of 50 permits on prime ag for that purpose that was mentioned last time.
Excuse me, Victor, are you saying 50 permits only on prime ag land, but there could be 100 permits on land that's not prime?
That's correct, yeah. In other counties, consistently, we haven't really seen any limits on cultivation, at least. You'll certainly see limits on dispensaries, sort of like what Hollister did, putting a cap of 2. There are other jurisdictions that have consistently done that with dispensaries for dispensary permits, whether in unincorporated areas of counties or in cities. For example, in Hollister, there is no cultivation limit. Monterey County adopted an ordinance that required them to take existing footprints of existing greenhouses, but when it comes to an actual permit limit, that's not really consistent when it comes to cultivation in counties. So what was thought of with the ad hoc committee members, along with county council with Sarah, was because the concern that we heard from you folks last month revolved around prime ag, was to limit the permits for prime ag, not applying that permit limit to any other land use or zoning, specifically to prime ag.
So will be no restriction on how many cultivation sites there are in the county as long as it's not on prime ag land?
Correct. Yeah, as long as they're vetted, right? As long as they're permitted, and as long as they follow the qualifications.
Thank you.
So,
okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
I've got a quick
So,
Excuse me, Victor.
yes.
So, Victor, while you're up there, so you seem to be, because everything I'm hearing from you is about other counties that are allowing this. Okay, and you're supposed to be a neutral party, right?
Correct.
Okay, so now tell me about all the counties that have banned it, restricted it, or those elements. I'm interested in the full story, both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And I apologize, Commissioner, if you think I'm sounding biased in
Well,
any
you only
in
talk
any way.
about how we can do it. I'd like to have
Yeah.
both sides because I need to have all sides in order to make a vote. Okay?
Great, awesome. So there are plenty of counties. I don't have that number for you. I could certainly dig it up for you. But there are plenty of counties that have not adopted any type of permit, whether it's cultivation, manufacturing, or dispensing. A lot of the areas in the Central Valley, a lot of the more conservative areas in the state of California have decided not to pursue local ordinances. So you are correct. There are plenty of counties that have essentially banned it.
Okay, but in those counties then, because again, we want all the information out there. So do their urban centers allow it and then the county bans it? Or is it across the board where the county and all cities within the county ban it? Or
Well, I mean, the county, to answer your question, Commissioner, the county obviously can only restrict it to unincorporated areas of their
Right.
jurisdiction. So every county is different. I mean, there's cities in Monterey County. Monterey County has allowed it. Unincorporated Monterey County has allowed cultivation, manufacturing, and dispensing in unincorporated Monterey County. That's not the case, Commissioner, with some of the peninsula cities. They have banned it.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. This is an update. So one of the changes or modifications that was made to the ordinance after consulting with the ad hoc committee was a 100-foot boundary line from premises setback. So 100 feet from any parcel line, essentially, whether it's butting up to any other land use or whatever it may be. And then the 400-foot setback, which was originally a 400-foot setback to parcel line, was changed to a 400-foot setback from any existing residential structure, neighboring residential structure. So again, that's one of the highlighted changes or recommendations made by the ad hoc committee. No change on the 100-foot sensitive use. Other jurisdictions have banned it, but those jurisdictions that have allowed it vary on this number. So they could go anywhere from the state mandate of 600 feet from schools to less restrictive on non-school premises, like the city of Hollister did and a few other jurisdictions. But this is consistent to what you saw last month as well. The cannabis, so last time we discussed the land use component that you see in the map that's right here, right in front of you. Those land use designations have not changed. They're the same as you saw last month. The only thing that changed after consulting with the Board of Supervisors was to make an adjustment to what we were calling last month the Southern Cannabis Line. As you recall, and as I mentioned to you last month, there was a desire to put a southern boundary and not allow or essentially ban cannabis cultivation south of this line. And that's still in play. That's still the recommendation of the ad hoc committee, still the recommendation that you're seeing here tonight. So the line was slightly adjusted as recommended by one of the Board of Supervisors and supported by the ad hoc committee. So that you'll see that map in just a second. And again, these are the land use components. I'm not going to go through it again, but you have the map here right in front of you. And this here is the map that you have right here. I'm not sure if you have smaller copies in front of you, but that is the map that was provided by RMA staff, and thank you, James, for getting that done. But this map has the addition of what we would consider to be the southern borderline, that purple line cutting across near Piscinas. And then it also includes all listed sensitive uses that are within the ordinance with the 1,000-foot radius. Commissioner?
So how did you come up with the north-south line? Is it just because it would be too hard to enforce or down there?
Yeah, what we heard consistently...
Why didn't you cut the line up here? Because that whole east side's going to be just as hard to enforce.
Yeah, it was, I'll allow James to chime in a little bit on that. It was, and we talked about it kind of in length on how to work that line out and how to make that line happen. For context, just to let you know that it was a concern of code enforcement, and it was a concern of the Sheriff's Department of access to some of these properties and enforcing the future, potentially the future ordinance. So, but we tried to work out as best as possible how we could address that. So we actually used it's not longitudinal, the line, thank you, latitude, a line that's registered. So it's an actual registered location. So you'll see schools in there. This map actually doesn't detail as much as this map here. It does have all the orange, which is the sensitive use areas. I'm going to step away from the mic for a second. It does highlight all the sensitive use areas in orange, but the map also includes, and this was just updated just recently, so I apologize that I don't have it on the PowerPoint, but it does indicate what the sensitive use is: school bus stop, preschool, youth-oriented facility, church, as you see outlined there. So the descriptions are on each sensitive use. And that's about it when it comes to the modifications from what you saw last month in the ordinance. So if you have any questions, I'm certainly open to those, or I could take questions after public comment.
Any planning commissioner want to ask a question now?
We can wait after public comment.
Okay, is there anyone? Okay. All right, Victor, we'll
Thank you.
open up the public hearing first. Now, once I've opened it and closed the public hearing, we will not take any more input from the audience. So please, if you have anything to say, be sure and do it before I close the public hearing. And I would also like anyone who would like to speak to fill out a speaker card and turn that into the clerk right now. I'll give you 2-3 minutes to get that done. But please give it to the clerk. The clerk will be calling. Yeah, well, if you put that you wanted to speak on both items on the first one, that's fine. But other than that, I need you to fill out another one. And the clerk will be calling the names.
I note that there was one typo that we've located on page 19 of the ordinance, subdivision J, which says 2,000 and then the 500, but there's a little typo right there. So when the final ordinance, we would correct it to 2,500.
Which page, Barry?
Page 19, subdivision J.
Okay, everyone is fill out and turn in a speaker card then. Okay, I will open the public hearing. First, Janet, would you call the first speaker, please?
I'll make this real short, and it's going to sound fairly redundant. Again, I've been attending most of the Board of Supervisors hearings and met with multiple board members on the draft that you see before you right now. I've seen the original versions, and I've seen the changes that have been made. Again, I'd like to thank the ad hoc committee staff, the board, and you for your time, and I think currently the version that you have in front of you is a great start as far as moving forward. Again, is it perfect? Maybe not. Time will tell as you go through the ordinance and implement its policies, and as the state changes its rules and you learn from it, there may be amendments later. But as far as the version you have currently right now, I feel it's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, Sarah?
Good evening again, Steve Becerra. I think that the comments about why does the county have to have this is a good thought. I mean, why do we have to have commercial cannabis cultivation in our county? Well, the answer is our Board of Supervisors has a flavor that that's what they want to do, and it seems like that's what's going to happen. So, if that's what's going to happen, and I'm sure that it's going to happen for financial reasons, for income stream, and rightly so. If they're going to do it, there should be a sufficient income stream to pay for these costs. But the point here in front of the Planning Commission is zoning. And I understand your feeling about 5-acre parcels and weeds and all that stuff, but these are 5-acre parcels, regardless of their weed patches or not. These are homes where people live with children and people who've lived here for a long time who improved their properties to make them nice, and people who moved to this county and are improving their properties to fit the general plan to bring in tourism and other reasons. And it's important. And I just urge you to consider restricting these commercial operations to areas of light industrial and industrial areas where they'll have less effect on your constituents and the people who live here and who raise families on these parcels. I've spent 20 years in law enforcement, and I have been dropped out of a helicopter in a marijuana grow to face armed marijuana cultivators recently in the 90s. And it's a dangerous operation. And the people who don't want to play by the rules are dangerous people. So if you're going to do this, if the Board of Supervisors is going to do this, and they are, then put it in places that's going to have the least effect on people that live here. They has the least possibility of creating hazards to public safety. And do it indoors. And just for clarification, state law for personal is indoors. It's indoors only. What you did, the previous topic, was to make that recommendation to abide by state law and allow personal cultivation indoors only. because the ordinance was talking about outdoor growing, which is outside of what state law allows. State law doesn't allow that. It's indoor only. Indoor structures, indoor homes. So I had some other things to say, but I would just, I would just ask you to consider some of these ag productive properties that are on small lots. It's going to come back to haunt people. It is. It's going to be a nightmare when the sheriff's office has to enforce an unknown number of commercial grows on those kind of lots. Thank you.
Stephanie Smith?
Yeah, I found it.
Hi there. My apologies that I came in late earlier and was talking sort of to this earlier as well as the other measure. I just wanted to reiterate, the conflict between having this in areas where residences are, even on a parcel. I mean, I'm on a 10-acre parcel, and I'm next to a 31-acre parcel that has, they've had, over the last few years, they had 100 plants. They've had, thousands as it's expanded into a half-acre grow site. The smell is so bad that I can't even open my windows at night for like just minutes, and it makes it really a very unlivable situation. But even worse than the smell, because I can go ahead and pay for air conditioning when I don't need to, or I shouldn't need to, but is being living next to one of these operations that brings in crime into my neighborhood and being trapped down a small road. And so this is another recommendation I had, is just, if, obviously, if you're down a road that's not safe enough for, for safety vehicles, the same reason that you've tried to draw the line, or they've recommended drawing the line on the south side, is keeping it from being down roads that are not county maintained. It's not safe, it's not manageable, and also obviously the dark skies issue. The smell is a big nuisance. The crime is a big nuisance. It definitely, I believe it belongs, as other speakers have said, if you're going to draw a line, why not draw it around the industrial, commercial areas, the non-agricultural? I mean, if it's going to be indoors, why even have it in agricultural productive areas? I think it would definitely recommend that it be in a commercial area alongside other, if this is medical, what we're saying is medical, you have it in a facility next to other medical uses. Seems like it would make sense on a zoning level. So that would be my recommendation, is put it in a tilt-up building that's hard to break into, so then there's less risk of crime, and put it into commercial or industrial areas and keep it away from properties with residences. So that's what I would urge and request. And from my own personal experience, I love living in this county. I've been here for 6 years now, and have lived out in the country in Santa Clara County, which incidentally, I do believe that Santa Clara County does ban outdoor growing. So I don't think that was clarified, but there are counties that have banned outdoor growing. So I urge us to either do the same or contain it to inside buildings in a commercial area where it can be easily patrolled, lit up enough where it's safe and is not going to interfere with dark skies in a residential area. Thank you.
Jack Kirk?
Thank you again for taking a few moments. And, I know, Mark, that you talk about that these are agricultural sites. We have a Blenheim apricots. We do 20 tons. It's not a great, big orchard, but it's been there for 30 years, and we keep it productive. Our place looks great. And I think there's a lot of places like that around that I think that are trying to keep their places productive on 5 acres. I know there's others. I sell real estate. I own Realty World here in town. And so I understand. But that's our county building site. That's what you've told us is our home site for 5 acres. We can put one house on an accessory, maybe perhaps a granny unit. And that's what a lot of us have built on. And to have someone take a property next door and turn it into a grow would be difficult for a lot of us. And that's why I think that area, the east side of North County, from South County up to North County, needs to be protected. You've already established those are building sites. Now, the other thing is, on page 6, on page 11, you have the different permitted specialties or zonings, and which is specially mixed light cottage, specially cottage mixed. And I got the definition from Sarah. And these would allow, for example, specially cottage would allow 2,500 square feet or less of total canopy size for mixed cultivation. They can have 25 plants for outdoor cultivation. So some of the zoning, this is your expertise, not mine. I mean, some of the zoning, you need to look at these, because one of the things you see the marijuana people do is they do collectives, and they'll get a little 25 plants here, 25 plants here, and it creates a collective. And some of these, I think these zoning issues could create those types of things to occur. And if you guys ever want to see something kind of interesting, no matter what laws you pass, there's the marijuana people out there teaching them how to get around it. Go to growlegal.com, and you can learn how to get around any county law creating a collective. And it's growlegal.com. And so every time you guys come to law, there's going to be the players out there that are going to try to get around it. And so I appreciated Ray's idea of raising even that didn't go through, to raise the cost, because that's the only way you can get to them, because they're all doing this for their pocketbook. But I think by allowing these specially mixed cottage uses, indoor and outdoor, mixed light, you're going to create opportunities for them to create underground collectives. And you have people in town here that will provide them all the hydroponics and things that they need. There's a local agricultural company that will do that, and taking positions in their grows. So I think we need to be careful of those kinds of things. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Any questions of me?
No,
Michael Halpern.
Hi, I'm not very good at this. I was sort of puzzling about the, south of Piscinas, and I saw a sheriff's deputy the other day in Tres Pinos, and I asked him, well, how's your cell phone coverage? He said, I've got satellite coverage, satellite phone, I've got good coverage, the whole county. So I kind of feel like we're sort of mixing regulation and enforcement on the south of Piscinas, meaning if we've got the Fairview Road area. I don't know how many of the 27 growers are in that area, but it seems like that area has a high impact on the neighbors. Piscinas, probably much lower density, and it seems like a much more desirable. Law enforcement or code enforcement is not going to be, they're going to be going to sites where people are trying to be in compliance, and so I don't think that there's more likely to be a gun battle down there than at a site that's in compliance in the Fairview Road area. So I'm sort of bewildered by why they're eliminating that. In the beginning, I heard the supervisors talk about limiting it to 20-acre parcels, and but this woman who spoke said that the parcel was 31. So I'm not sure how you're going to deal with. It seems like 5 acres is too small to me, but I don't know. I think we need to keep this away from high-density housing. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
I have no other speaking questions.
All right. Is there anyone else that would care to address the board at this time before I close the public hearing? All right. I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board.
Madam Chair, if I could just request before you begin your deliberations a couple of subjects, and I would defer to Mr. Gomez and County Council and the committee on these. But some of the things is essentially the county city planner that popped out to me are, one is the annual renewal requirement of these permits. That's going to be a very extensive undertaking, or it could be, if we have 20, 30, 40, 50 of these permits to have to renew them annually. I mean, that would have to start literally, 6 months into the approval period of their current permit. Typically, from a land use perspective, a conditional use permit would run with a land use unless the conditions of approval were violated, and then that use permit could be reconsidered and even rescinded. But just something to think about, and maybe we can talk about. The bond requirement of $2,500 to take in for every one of these permits to protect against violations, that's also going to be very administratively intensive. I would suggest that we draft that to be more of a penalty, that if a permit condition is being violated, that similar to the other ordinance that was talked about, that there be a daily penalty attached to it versus trying to take in a bond for every one of these and then track those bonds 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. That can be a very intensive administrative effort. And then lastly, just on the setbacks, I'm sure the ad hoc committee has talked about this and given it considerable thought, but typically setbacks are measured from a property line. If these setbacks are intended to be measured from a greenhouse or a plant or something that requires, a site visit or, some kind of a GIS investigation, that's going to be much more difficult. It'd be simply much more cleaner if they were required from property lines. That's something that can be checked very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Is there any planning commissioner that would like to start?
Well,
Robert?
I'll start, yeah. I saw that they changed the boundaries. I mean, 100 feet, it's not a lot, but it's quite a bit on anybody that has a small 10-acre or 5-acre parcel. And if we want to let the small farmers be able to, make use of their land, because it is ag. Understand? 5 acres ag. We're trying to restrict people what they can do on their property. I don't believe in that. If you want to do whatever you want to do on your property, it's your property. There's so many government regulations already on everything. So, that 100 feet should be maybe 50 feet to allow the small, or give a preference to the small guys with small 10 acres or 5-acre parcels. And then 400 feet from a residence, I mean, that's still, the city, what is 180 feet from a residence? So those kind of things can be changed. That's just my opinion. And then is it 400 feet from a house or from a home? Is it the resident's home or is it the neighbor's home? That's not clarified real clear.
Okay.
So, talk about this.
Okay.
I'm just, yeah. That's the only questions I had.
Okay.
Good. Okay. So everyone keeps kind of talking about this like this is a regular ag crop, and I just don't see it that way. I see this as more of a manufacturing style of operation than a row crop or anything like that. And as such, then I think that, first of all, James, I agree with everything you're saying. So on those issues, but I think what we need to do is actually have a grow overlay area and isolate the growth area to a specific area that can be easily enforced and watched over, and it would actually end up affecting less people. So it would, and basically all your permits say M, so that's great. We just keep those the same. They're manufacturing permits. So the what I see is everything shouldn't be number one inside. Number 2, restrictions would be air scrubbing machines. And then probably some kind of a chain link fence with concertina wire around the outside. So then there's less likelihood of issues with criminal behavior. It's more restrictive. I just do not see this as lettuce, tomatoes, or any other kind of, it doesn't even qualify for Williamson Act stuff. So, and we have, as Commissioner Zlotkin was saying, we have a limited amount of money, a limited amount of law enforcement personnel, and, opening this up to the county as a whole, across the entire county is going to create law enforcement issues that I think we have no idea what we're getting ourselves into. So I think the commission itself needs to look at the map, needs to look at land use issues, and try to designate an area that would be suitable away from everything else that would work for this type of operation. I also think we should limit it down to a certain number of permits, not anything close to what you're talking about currently on this. But if we keep them all within a very specific restricted area, it's going to keep our costs down as far as code enforcement and law enforcement. And with the overlay, the better zoning and land use, maybe the way to achieve this would be taking it to the chair and have her set up an ad hoc to work on this a little bit as far as that goes, and then they could take it back to supervisors, and Barbara could be involved in that, and see if we can pare this out if you're in a hurry to get this done. But otherwise, I just think this is something that needs to be highly restricted. It's not a typical ag crop, and I don't think we need to open it up to the entire county. If we do, I think we're going to need a fleet of helicopters, and that's going to be expensive.
Thank you. Jean, would you like to?
Well, there's a number of concerns. I guess I wanted to ask Barbara a couple questions, because I don't recall from my reading through this. With regard to the granting of permits, are there any conditions written into the draft of what we have here that, for instance, give a preference or a question mark to things like the size of the operation? For instance, do we get more money if they're going to have a huge impact on the environment and a big thing? Or is the amount of fees irrelevant? I mean, it's not connected to size of operation. What's the deal there?
Right now, it's contemplated that there's going to be a fee structure involved, and that's going to be set. Probably, we haven't determined the final system of it yet. You could do it by license types and have different fees, but they may be very similar on the actual fee because it takes a certain amount of work to process it. Now, if there's more in-depth processing of a larger project, then the fees could be higher for the larger projects, especially if you did it on a time basis. Then associated with this would likely be a taxing structure that would have to go to the vote of the people, and that would be based upon square footage as contemplated, so that the larger sites would provide more revenue.
Okay. And in terms of timing here, my understanding so far is that we're not even going to accept any applications until sometime after October. So we really are going to move slowly and deliberately here. That's the game plan at this point.
Right. This is just the first step. I want to let the Planning Commission know that there's also rules and regulations that are going to be developed, which are going to be very specific about the type of security and, what type of water and air filters and et cetera, landscaping plans, what would be required of these sites once they're permitted. There's going to be extensive rules and regulations that still have to be developed. And part of the reason that we put off accepting applications for a certain period of time is to make sure that we have the fee structure in place and that it's a very organized and methodical process as we go forward.
In terms of another variable that I think might be important would be the location where there might be plus points if it is in an already industrial area. Some of the concerns raised by the public already in a place that's commercial, not moving out into an area that doesn't have anything commercial going on in it. And so that consideration of impacts on the surrounding property area, I think, is a legitimate planning condition, and so that if the impacts are great, and an opportunity for the people in those surrounding areas to weigh in on what those impacts might be. We're talking about dark skies, but there's also noise during the day, which can be extremely irritating. Trucks coming in, whatever, things happen. And then there's all kinds of quiet enjoyment factors that could be impacted where you have a quiet rural area right now, and all of a sudden there's a lot of stuff's going on. So I just would urge the ad hoc committee at least to consider setting forth some criteria which would govern who gets the permits and who doesn't, or if they're going to get them, that they have to pay more if they have greater impacts. It's really kind of nuisance law. I mean, that's what it will end up being if somebody starts litigation. That's all I can think of right now.
Mark?
Well, I just got a question backing up a little bit about these code enforcement officers there's no criteria. They can just go beat on any door they want and ask to look around?
Well, normally we're a complaint-driven department. So, usually there's a rationale and a reason for them to be investigating a site. They don't, based upon the staffing, they don't just randomly go up to houses and ask to look at the people's houses. That's like a standard provision, though, in ordinances to allow the code enforcement or the law enforcement officer to enter onto the property. That being said, if a resident refuses, there is a procedure in the state law that allows for an inspection warrant to be provided, and that's if you don't have any other, exigent circumstances, other types of mechanisms for entry. But if you want to inspect to ensure compliance with the county code, and if you're not allowed into the property, you can get an inspection warrant to visit the property.
I don't understand. You just because they decide that maybe somebody's doing something wrong, they just go beat on the door and say, I want to look at your place. This is like a privacy thing. It seems to me that there should be some specific criteria before they do that. Not just, willy-nilly, whether your neighbor said you got dope growing over there and we're going to come and look. Well, based on what? I don't get that. I'm uncomfortable with that big time. I don't understand why they have a privacy deal, and that's why they have warrants. From the court order. Not so. And people get intimidated and end up in hot water for some other violation that had nothing to do with the marijuana, right? But once they find it as a code enforcement officer is a violation, then you get hammered. I don't like it at all. The other thing is, you could really eliminate a lot of the stuff just in an opposite way of the way they're doing this. What you do is you just do no permits or north of Piscinas. They're all south. You don't have the neighbor interactions, right? They're all big parcels. Save a lot of problems. Instead of eliminating it, make it focus it there. You don't mess with anything.
Are those?
Okay.
I like
That's
that
enough?
idea. I like that idea.
Well, I don't know that it's the wildest thing going.
Mm-hmm. See, my comments are more, I'm concerned with this ordinance because I don't see the safeguards for the general public. Mm-hmm. There's, if you're going to put this in my neighborhood, how am I going to know? Am I going to get some kind of notice? Am I going to have a right to appeal? Am I going to have a right to a hearing? And, there's no safeguards in here for neighbors.
I could answer that question for you, Commissioner. So first comes the ordinance, and that's really what allows these existing or these proposed uses, and specifically to you folks within these zones that are being proposed by the ad hoc committee. The rules and regulations and operating procedures, licensing, permitting, application process is not part of an ordinance. So the security components that you're talking about, all of the concerns that have been brought up by other commissioners as well, will be written in the rules and regulations and operating procedures for all of these facilities.
I understand that portion of it. What I don't guess I agree with at this time is how can I pass an ordinance saying that this is good and we want to move this forward in the county if I have no idea what the rules are and what the safeguards are going to be for the neighbors?
So if I'm not mistaken, and Barb, please correct me if I am mistaken, that's a decision for the legislative body to make, and for the Board of Supervisors. The question that you have really before you here tonight is specifically in regards to the land uses. So the rules and regs will be reviewed and adopted by the Board of Supervisors, the legislative body that will...
Yeah, but that's part and parcel with land use, and that's what she's saying. Okay, it's how can we, if we don't know that they're protected, how can we go into an area and say, okay, allow it within this general area, when you do not know, when the parceling is so close together that the neighbor is going to be affected? Okay, that's what she's saying. She's got a valid point here, and it's on planning level. It's not on administrative level.
Yeah, I think that different counties have dealt with it differently, but I do think that the board has made an initial determination that they would like to allow marijuana cultivation in the county because they have reviewed this draft ordinance back in early May, and they were basically, in favor of it proceeding forward under this path to come to the Planning Commission and back to the board. So I think a lot of the initial determinations about whether marijuana should be allowed, whether it's good to have marijuana cultivation in the county, whether the county's resources are best spent in this way, whether we have adequate resources to do this, is it going to make money or is it not going to make money? Some of those decisions have already been made at the Board of Supervisors level, and some of the issues, and I can understand the commissioner's concerns, of course, because of it, how well you regulate it will have an impact on the neighboring properties, for example, so for security and such. But a lot of counties have adopted ordinances pertaining to like regulation and banning cultivation, for example, and regulating the cultivation under the general police power of the health and safety ordinance, general safety ordinances, and they haven't necessarily treated all components of the ordinance as a zoning ordinance. So, what I really wanted to focus was the Planning Commission is on more of the the zoning components, and I understand that the Planning Commission just wants to make sure that the public is adequately protected, but the zoning aspects, the setbacks, where it should be allowed, those are the areas that are kind of the primary focus for the Planning Commission.
It is, Barbara, but we look at every time something comes in here, we look at the neighbors and the protection of the neighbors. It's part of the project itself.
Right.
And so we can't do that here. It's really hard. I just moved over to the south of the Paisanis line with you guys. It's either highly restricted in an area or run it south so we have least impact on the neighbors and let them grow out in the mountains there and we can become a Humboldt County.
And I guess my
it's
other...
It's growing in the mountains.
The other, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I'm to the point now where we'll have a special zone, and that's where it's going to be, or it's got to be an industrial, or I don't want to see these things scattered all over the county. I don't think it's good for the county.
I don't think it's good land use.
No, it's not good land use.
Why couldn't they have the practice of like when somebody wants to change a permit that the neighbors within so far are notified prior to the issuance of the permit?
Exactly.
But it's going to be a conditional use permit, right? So
No.
Can't that be?
No, it's going to be administrative approval?
No, the reason
Then
that
you-
What they want.
Well, but I mean, maybe it should be in the ordinance before it's issued that the neighbors within so far are notified.
I will present a way forward because I know that there's a lot of different issues that the Planning Commission wants the Board of Supervisors to know about. So depending on what happens today with the resolution that's presently prepared, I have an alternative resolution where we could, in one of the exhibits, where we can, I've listed some of the points that I thought the Planning Commission might want the board to know how it feels on certain issues. And then we can list these issues point by point and take a vote from the Planning Commission. Like, does the Planning Commission prefer the Board of Supervisors to consider, that it be in a specific zone? And then we could take a poll of the of the Planning Commission, and we can vote on each specific issue and have that incorporated into the resolution that goes to the board. And I can pass that out depending on what the Planning Commission would like.
Okay, I guess I'll bring it back to the commission then, and we'll make a decision.
I got a question, Ray. You said that the Williamson Act doesn't recognize marijuana. When was that decision made?
Well, one of the speakers was speaking to that, but and I have to believe they've done their research to a certain degree. But it's fruit and fiber, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, fruit and fiber. So, so how does that fall within those boundaries?
Well,
and not only that, but the Williamson Act is kind of moving away anyway.
One
But
is hemp.
yeah,
there's fiber.
that would be fiber, but
Production of
this is
fiber.
not hemp.
What?
This is not hemp.
Well, it's related. I mean, it doesn't have fiber?
Yeah, well, this is not hemp. Hemp is fiber, and you make ropes out of it, and I would agree with that. But this is marijuana. This is like money growing on little blossoms on a bush, a tall weed. That's.
Yeah, but I don't understand why it doesn't qualify for the Williamson Act.
Well,
it's an ag commodity.
It's ag.
I'm still back to the idea that this is not really truly an ag crop. It's not something you see normally as an ag crop. It's too dangerous for that. It affects the moral fiber of the community, if nothing else, and you don't have to worry about that with any of the other crops. Those are all fruit and fiber. They're lettuce, tomatoes, onions. I mean, come on. This is just not a regular ag crop.
Let's ask our attorney, is marijuana covered under Williamson Act?
I don't know. I mean,
Victor, do you know?
I've never had that question.
But it is ag.
Could I just,
It is an ag product.
I'm just trying to think of wording, because I think what I'm hearing everybody say is that we want to recommend to the supervisors that they select an area of lowest impact on residents in the county and limit marijuana projects that are applied for here to areas that are already either commercial, industrial, or other areas that they will have to define in terms of a location which is highly unlikely to have a lot of residents in it. That's for them to fool around with. But just basically say there's something wrong with spreading this all over the county, interfering with everybody, and it's going to make such lopsided property values. I mean, I can see nothing but havoc coming from this. So I just say put it. If it's already commercial, if the zoning now says this would be okay, fine, put it there. If you want to go anywhere else, then define what that area is, and the criteria must be least impact on residential property, something like that.
Specific.
You can't just make up
in other words, a
wording that's
specific
right here,
zone
but that's
area.
just the idea of it.
So
Yeah.
a specific zone area.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
then we could probably expedite this without an amendment to the general plan by having like a specific zone, right? A specific plan area.
yep.
And we
probably
could
do that.
expedite it that way. So we could actually do this without going through the 2-year process of amending the general plan and changing it, and just calling out specific plan areas and saying, okay, this is generally the area, but what we need to do as planners is sit down and look at the map and say, okay, what impacts are there and where's the least amount of impact, and start picking some of those areas.
Yeah, I mean,
It's either that or south of Piscinus.
That's all really we should be weighing in on. All these other collateral questions are not planning issues. So, if they wanted to hear from us about land use elements, I think we have consensus that we want the land use to be where it's going to least impact our residential uses.
Some of those other, and you're kind of new to the commission, but a lot of those, as Pat was saying, a lot of those are affected. I mean, when we get a project line in, it's got to go through CEQA. CEQA basically handles a lot of those questions, and they're all answered for us either through the CEQA or we ask them at the time to know whether or not we want the project there. So let's just pretend this isn't marijuana, that it's a paint operation or lead-based paint operation or something like that. And then a lot of those questions would still be arising about neighbors, affected neighborhoods, the neighborhood. You're talk about noise. We have a noise ordinance in place already, and if this is an ag area, then basically they can make a lot of noise. Tractors make a ton of noise. They could make all of that up to a certain number of decibels according to the noise ordinance to, I think, 11 at night, 10:30 at night, something like that. So they would be able to legally perform all of those noise operations that you were talking completely legally because they are in an ag area. That's what we are first before we're residential. And I know a lot of the people here, they are in an ag area, they come in, they have a house there, and they consider it to be a residential zone, but it's not. The residential zones are in the city. We're ag. And so ag is the primary purpose of the properties. So a lot of these uses can go ahead and move forward with noise and things like that. But smell, other issues involved in this particular crop that are not part of any other ag crop, those issues aren't going to go away. We need to know what those are, address those, and try to mitigate those as best we can before we say, okay, that zoning works. And so, yeah, I know, and I don't want to be a supervisor either. I don't want to step on their toes, but also I don't want to do this quickly and poorly. I want to make sure we investigate it very clearly, know what we're getting ourselves into, and I think the public needs to be involved in the process for workshops, scopings, and other things so they can come in and address. I mean, really, that's the only reason the Planning Commission's here, is open workshop for the public to come in and say their piece and tell us what they think is right. We just follow the books, the planning codes, the general plan, all of those issues. So I'll step down from my soapbox.
You know, Mr. Pierce, you talk about workshops. People are notified. People that want to come out here, they'll come and listen to, or come speak their mind. I mean, we can't just be, let's do this, let's do that. That's what the meetings are for. We're here. People want to really go against it. This should have been filled. You know, we can't come to a conclusion here. I say just throw it back to the supervisor. Let them make the decision. I mean, it's an ag. It's an ag. And if you live in ag, you can go 24/7. I live in ag. And here's those during the tomato season. Those machines going all night, 24 hours a day. But I chose to live there. You know, you don't want to live in ag. You don't want that type of environment. Move to a city. Move to where there's no any type of farming around you. And you complain about the noise at 10 o'clock. When you live in ag, it's, you know, you're going to have noises. You got those tractors going, you got the big machines, you got the tomato machines, harvesters, you got everything going. You got early in the morning, they're harvesting. So.
Yeah, but I think gunshots are above the decibel level that's legal in the county.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, you want to live in a quiet neighborhood, move somewhere that's quiet. Move to South County, you don't have no noise over there.
Well, they all did. They've all moved to quiet neighborhoods, and then we're
talking about,
they're trying to keep them quiet.
You're trying to say move it to South County. There's already growing illegal patches out there, and they're not enforcing it.
Yeah.
Let's be realistic here.
So we'd legalize the entire South County, and then those guys wouldn't have to worry about being busted, right?
Okay,
but that's not going to happen. We're trying to legalize it so the county can make some kind of revenue.
Yeah.
Those guys are still going to do it illegally, you like it or not. They're there.
It's true.
Yeah, but the difference is now Darren can go after them. You know, if this goes down and we lay it down, we say, oh, only in this manufacturing area, only is this legal. Now the sheriff's department can go after the rest of the county strongly with teeth and start making arrests and bringing people in and enforcing.
But how can you go after there was only 2 sheriffs on duty,
That's beside the point.
you know? So,
Well, not really. That is the point. We can't afford this whole thing.
Well,
That's
it's not-
why
there's
we're
not
in a
enough.
dilemma here.
Yeah.
But let's move on because we're,
Okay.
you know, if
we're-
we can't come to a conclusion, I just say, throw it to the supervisor, let them make the decision. Maybe it's above our heads here.
Well, they're asking us for, do we have any
They're asking us
consensus
for
on
our
the
input.
planning thing? Yeah.
They're asking us for our input. I mean, whatever we decide here, it's going to be, the ultimate answer is going to be their decision. Whatever they want to do, they're going to do it.
Okay, then let's do some consensus issues. I hope I'm not stepping on your toes here.
Well, I was just wondering, is anyone ready to make a motion?
Well, not
I was ready to make a
maybe
motion.
a consensus of what Barbara was saying. She makes a bullet list that says basically, are we in favor of everyone going to the south of the line, or specific manufacturing zones, or any of what James was talking about? All of that, we can take those one at a time and say we have consensus on actually these points and think they should be addressed, or that we send this to staff, have them rework it, bring it back to us next commission meeting if possible, and look at it and see what it looks like then.
Send the ordinance back?
Not to supervisors, but to staff, and have them rework and or ad hoc and staff and rework it and then bring it back to us.
But this has been in the works for quite some time, from my understanding.
Yeah,
Am I
but
correct?
without planning
Let
commission
me-
input.
I think that it might be most efficient if we brought if we had a decision point by point about what the planning commission feels, then that could be brought to the board of supervisors, and they could evaluate. And if they wanted the planning commission to investigate or come up with a specific zone, then they could direct the planning commission to do further work in a specific area. And if they, at least that way you'll get we'll find out exactly what the planning commission feels on various issues, and then let the board of supervisors determine, whether they just want to act on the ordinance as it's currently drafted. At least it will go to the board, and they can decide, do we want to act on it, or do we want it to stay at the planning commission for a longer period of time to develop it, a different type of ordinance. But at least they'll have that capability of acting on it in July if they would like.
So the board wants to act on this in July?
That's the plan.
Which is next month.
And if they decide not to, and if they decide that they would like it to be revised further, if they, evaluate the planning commission, obviously they'll take into consideration what the planning commission would like. So we have an obligation to take this back to the board and explain, what the consensus of the planning commission is, and then we'll find out, what the board would like to do as far as the ordinance.
Well, I think that's the only solution. I don't know how anybody else feels.
I'm just not sure that we have consensus on much of anything. So maybe we're just going to have opinions that, we have concerns about this, and this, and send it that way, because we have different
That's
concerns.
basically
And we just voice our concerns collectively and say, that's the best we can do. I've already voiced mine. I think away from people, and I consider 5-acre parcels, even though it's an ag zone, that's sort of what it was in the 20th century. It's not in the 21st century. And some of those 5-acre parcels, especially people like me who live in the hills where nobody's growing anything, we don't think of them as ag zones, but, they technically still are ag residential, right? So my feeling is we stay away from anything that has a /residential or straight up residential to the extent possible, wherever that may be. And then each of you have sort of said different things, and I'm satisfied to just send it that way, because I don't think we all agree on that.
Can I pass this out at least for the board's or the commission's consideration of a proposed resolution, and then you can turn to Exhibit A of the resolution, so we can work our way through it and see whether that would work. The top of the resolution has the same basic content as the other resolutions, but where the key difference is in Section 4, which indicates the Planning Commission commends the work of the ad hoc committee, the Board of Supervisors, and staff in the development of the proposed ordinance to date. The Planning Commission hereby recommends that the Board of Supervisors give due consideration of the recommendations set forth in Exhibit A attached here too when evaluating the proposed ordinance for adoption. These issues are those that are raised by individual planning commissioners, not by a formal vote on each item, except as were noted in the exhibit. And then in the exhibit, there's different issues, and we can add to them point by point if the planning commission would like, and take, kind of a roll call or vote and see whether there's any consensus on certain issues.
Sounds reasonable.
Can you just keep it?
So, yeah.
Vote and just turn it in?
So if the commission wanted to, then the issue is on number 1, how many people would vote that there be a restriction on the total number of permits or total number of square feet of cannabis business facilities on prime ag land by ordinance or by resolution adopted by Board of Supervisors. That's the language in bold is the language that's been added, and it's not in the draft ordinance as it's currently written. So this is the proposal. If the Planning Commission would like that to be added, then you would say, okay, how many people are in favor of that? How many people are against that? So, it's up to you. But then we can work through some certain items and have some clarity about, how you would like to change it. And we can go point by point and then add points at the end because it doesn't address everything that's been raised tonight.
I commend you for having anticipated
Yeah.
where we were going.
Yeah.
I would have no problem with number 1. We're looking at, you didn't number these pages, but it's the last few pages of what you just
Right.
gave us, right?
Right.
Okay, after the attest page, so I guess it's page 5,
numbers
maybe.
now.
1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4.
I should have
Okay,
noted it.
so you're proposing that we just go through these ones that are set forth here and see who's on board with them? Does anybody agree? I'm agreeable to that. You guys feel the same way? Are you willing to try that as a means to get some consensus? Okay.
How does the rest of the commission feel?
Yeah, we can work through this.
Okay.
Should we just do them one at a time?
That was number 1.
Okay, on the number 1, limiting the number of permits on prime ag land.
I think we were a consensus that we didn't believe prime ag land should be in play.
Right, that's how I feel. I don't think prime ag land should be involved at all. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels.
Well, they have a recommendation, the 25 of them?
Those are limited from the
On
permits.
prime land, what was the rationale?
The rationale was around square footage. If at the max, square footage was 22,000 per cultivation site, and each permit was for a full, if it happened to be, that's not necessarily the case, but if it happened to be a full site, it would be a total of 25 acres in prime ag.
What were they trying to get done by doing that? Why?
Preserving it to 25 acres in prime ag. Yeah, just limiting it to essentially a square footage.
But I believe I think we came up with that last time because we were talking about it. And I don't believe that at that time I realized we were talking then about no limit on any place else in the county. I don't think it belongs on prime ag land. I just don't. You're going to be building a building and...
it'll grow anywhere.
25 acres is not a whole lot of ag land.
Yeah, but why put it there?
How many acres are of prime ag land in San Bernardino County? Do you know?
I don't have the exact figure. That would take a while.
I mean, 25 acres is not even 1,000%, in my opinion.
That's true, but my feeling is more with the prime ag land, we can keep crops on prime ag land where marijuana can be grown anywhere.
But it's only going to be limited to 25 permits, I believe, or 50
But-
permits.
It still takes
But
it
you-
out
but
production
you're-
from for prime ag.
And you're still going to be putting a building on it, and, you're going to need different things. I don't see a reason it has to go on prime ag land. I just don't.
I kind of disagree with that, but
And I'm with Pat, so that's 2.
Saying no prime ag.
No prime ag land.
I could do that.
I like that.
Okay.
Okay, no permits
Okay,
on
so
prime
then
ag.
it's
4-1?
4-1.
So would that be the exact language that's in this, or do you want me to modify it so the Board of Supervisors
No permits on prime ag land.
shall not permit?
Not permit on prime ag land.
Board of Appeals shall. So it shall not permit cannabis business facilities on prime ag land.
And prime ag is still as defined already in all our codes. I mean, there still is a good definition of that, I hope. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the Board of
very good.
Supervisors, so the language will be, that's in bold, the Board of Supervisors shall not permit cannabis business facilities on prime ag land, period. And then the rest of that bold is taken out. So that's the first one, and there's a 4-1 vote on it.
Right.
Second one would be to eliminate, the strikeout is the language that's currently in the ordinance, and it strikes out everything except light industrial or heavy industrial. Does the Planning Commission want to limit this only to light industrial or heavy industrial zoning?
We were talked a little bit about, we said industrial or manufacturing or something like that, but I think what we really should be talking about is something that is marijuana-related only, a specific overlay zone.
Okay, then we can skip this one if the Planning Commission would like and
I'm
not
just
have a
I
vote.
just say skip it because
And then deal with the zoning later on in a separate item.
Yeah, they can. I think we
Okay.
just skip this one.
Okay.
Okay, let's
is
skip that
fine?
one.
We'll skip this
Okay.
one.
5 say we skip it.
Okay.
Number 3, the Board of Supervisors should consider setbacks, whether setbacks should be increased as a consideration of modification of subdivision A to increase, it increases it to 300 feet from the 100 feet from any boundary of the premises.
But if we go into the specific overlay area, we can skip this one too,
That's true.
right?
Yeah, but if they don't, we could be heard on this one. What do we think about this? Because they might accept one and not the other.
But see, then now if you go to this one and you say everybody votes for it, it eliminates all the 5, 10-acre parcels.
This does?
I think,
you
wasn't
know-
it like 400 feet would eliminate the 5-acre parcels, but 300 feet might not?
300 feet will eliminate it.
Depends on the
Shape of the parcel.
Yeah, the parcel.
But if it happens to be a square parcel, then what 200 would eliminate it. 200 foot setback.
Yeah, or 300 eliminated easily.
Okay.
Because usually a 5-acre parcel is what, maybe 400 feet by 600 or something
Not in
like
this
that?
county.
Huh?
Not in this county.
What's a 5-acre parcel?
Well, I've got a 7.5-acre parcel that's 100 feet across. And
Well, then
it
you-
runs all the way down because it was part of a master
But then you eliminate the
project,
the
and
setbacks.
the grandparents just sliced it into pieces.
Yeah, so you eliminate the 300 feet, you can't do nothing.
Yeah, so,
I think that this should be, I did think they should go back to 50 feet instead of 300. Decrease it instead of increasing it. Or,
I'm for increasing.
I'm for decreasing it.
Okay.
Let the small guy that has a 10 or 5 acres. But again, this is if they go to the non-productive ag land.
Just to be specific, if it is, Madam Chair, a perfectly shaped parcel, it's 210 feet. 210 feet would completely eliminate the parcel.
Yeah.
That's a perfect square?
Correct.
Okay, I'm for, don't think this is going to apply if we do the manufacturing overlay area, but
I think we should
in
just
any case, I'd say we should increase,
decrease.
just in case.
I say decrease. You're just allowing big business to get into it. And we talked about small business trying to get in. So
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of unfair, because there may be places where nobody's going to object, and these guys can make some money, and I don't feel good about that, so I wouldn't go for this. I don't want them to be there if there is objection, but if there isn't any, I don't know. Mark,
Well, the
how do you
likelihood
feel?
of impacts
You
are much
wanted-
greater.
You thought it was okay, right, to have the 5-acre people get into,
I think that's where they ought to go.
yeah, so I think the two of us are very, I mean, my definition of 5-acre parcels where they're not impacting the neighborhood and nobody's complaining about it, but there are some of those.
Yeah, I would rather allow it on a 5-acre parcel that's not prime egg land than,
That's
as long
my
as we
point
leave
of-
prime egg land alone.
Yeah.
So they would decrease it to 50 feet boundaries.
What, the 100 feet, Victor, the original 100 feet was done, why?
Well, a number of reasons, but odor mitigation was one of them. The potential of a 100-foot setback coming from the draft rules and regs from the Bureau of the State Bureau of Cannabis, with that likely recommendation. So for consistency's sake with the state. Yeah, really those two components were the driving force behind that.
Okay, so the 100, there is regulations by the state or proposed regulations?
It's a proposal. It's not, obviously, it's not completed yet. And there was a trailer bill that was adopted last week that's going to eventually merge both adult use and medical at some point, sooner than later. And so kind of expected to probably land around 100-foot setback. But again, that's just, that hasn't been determined yet.
Okay. I can go with 100 feet.
This 400 foot from any residence, that's a residence on the parcel that actually has the permit?
So the cannabis coordinator would actually be granted the ability to waive that for residential structures on existing premises. So if you are the cultivator, and you reside in the residence of that property, you would be able to go to the cannabis coordinator to waive that. Again, that would have to be determined by your cannabis coordinator.
But I don't understand why they have to have a special permit to operate within their own property. Why don't they just say that's for any neighboring residential property?
We duly noted. Yep.
How much do these permits cost?
They will. They are currently determined by administrative staff time to review them. So I believe, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's roughly, for the application permit, the initial application review permit will be roughly around $1,400, $1,500. And then for the time to review, if you make it through, if your application is good enough to make it through the second phase, then we request additional information. They do their background and live scan and all that stuff. We're looking at probably, about $7,400, I think it was determined. Again, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I have the numbers in my laptop. I could pull out the exact numbers, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then they're expecting, of course, to make some money on taxable, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So likely until they
just for fun, how would they be able to tell? A sale is being made.
What do you mean? What?
Well, I mean, they're selling the stuff all over the place today illegally. So why would that change? They have to bag it.
What your question is? But are you asking how do we know how they're going to be taxed?
Well, I guess is that on tonnage and the amount of plants or something like that?
They're going to be taxed by square footage, so the sales has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
So
that works.
to go through the permit process, we're talking about $8,000?
And that's still like a tentative number, because that could
Yeah.
still increase.
Right,
When
but I mean,
during
that's
the
what-
evaluation process, we're going to make sure that that's not under incorporating the number. So we need to look at it very closely how that's calculated.
And that's for the permitting process. And then there would be another fee based on square footage?
There'll be
the
a tax
building.
on square footage, yes.
I
don't think that, I think most of the taxes that have been presented statewide have passed on cannabis cultivation. I think that it's pretty easy. I know our county is pretty restrictive on taxes, but I think that this is a tax that will be presented to the public for a vote on it, and it's one that's very likely to be successful. And the board can also premise the adoption of the ordinance upon the successful passage of a tax that makes sure that there's, the cannabis industry supports it. So if the tax does not get passed in 2018, then the cultivation's no longer allowed. So it has to go hand in hand.
But to get the safeguards that we need in place before we really get started.
Yeah, that's going to be all based upon the fee, and the tax is going to be extra general fund revenue. The tax is not supposed to cover the cost of the operations at all.
How many permits are we truthfully then talking about issuing to make this all work? We're talking about hundreds, is that correct?
I don't know. Yeah.
So you have operating. They haven't been adopted yet, but you'll likely have a staff recovery model to help recover your costs to administer the program. So if you are if your staff is out there conducting a site visit, that cultivator will be assessed a fee for that review, whether it's through the Sheriff's Department, RMA, whatever it may be. You'll also have within at least the initial phase of the program a built-in negotiated development fee within the development agreement. So between, and I think this may get to your point, Commissioner Lowe, between now and the time the tax is passed, that there will be a temporary fee included in the development agreement that will act as it'll essentially be a development fee between now and the time the tax is passed. So again, that's an additional fee similar to what will be proposed in a tax initiative. Did I confuse you more?
No, I understand what you're saying, but I guess my concern is obviously the upfront money to start this.
Yeah, so the development fee has to be paid before there's any shovels in the ground.
Right, but with the staff that we're talking about and the code enforcement and all these different things, I mean, we're assuming that the tax is going to pass, obviously. But with just the upfront costs to get started, we're talking $100,000?
Yes, and to put it in perspective, Commissioner, for example, if we do follow, again, for example, something similar to a tax like the City of Hollister, just to use an example, if you use a $7 per square foot tax on canopy per square foot, again, you're looking at $140,000 per permit. Per permit.
Right,
Yeah.
I understand that.
So that hopefully that'll help put it in perspective. It won't be, and maybe Louis could help address a little bit of this, but really we don't see this. We got to crawl before we walk, right? So the cannabis coordinator position will likely first have to be filled somehow, and then as the revenues come in, we'll address the other components that will go into the staffing element of it. And it really depends on the amount of permits. You're right. It does depend on the amount of permits. It doesn't take much. I will say this. It doesn't take much to get to cost recovery, right? It doesn't take much to get to the point where you're recouping your staff costs. It doesn't take that much.
I'm going to call for a 5-minute break right now.
Okay.
And then we'll
That's
pick
great.
it up with you, Louis, when we come back.
Fantastic.
Okay? Okay, take a 5-minute break.
think I expected this to go this long.
Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order.
Hit Mark.
Okay, the meeting's called back to order. Louis, you were going to answer a question?
So I believe there was a question about staffing and how all of that would work. The discussions that we have had internally are such that at some point in time, the duties of the cannabis coordinator will be assigned once that position is created. Within each one of the departments, you're going to have an individual or a couple of persons who are going to be identified who will be part of a team that will review these particular applications. And they'll do so in a methodical fashion. Now, how all of that's going to work exactly, well, you're obviously going to have certain persons from the sheriff's department, certain people from perhaps environmental health, the auditor's office, county council, and so on and so forth. In terms of cost recovery, we'll be able to bill some of that initially against some of the revenues that we have come in. We don't know how much it's going to be, but eventually, to echo the mantra of our co-director at RMA, James Walgren, we want full cost recovery, and that's going to be the goal, and I believe we're going to achieve that. However, probably between the first 12 to 18 months, it's going to depend upon how many permits we get, what the revenues actually turn out to be, what they're going to look like. But I think that it can be safely said, even conservatively said, that there's going to be sufficient revenue to cover some, if not most, of those administrative costs going forward. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the thought.
It does to a degree, but what I'm assuming is that you're saying one or two people from each department. We are so thin with these people in these departments. Are we going to be able to? We're going to have to. I mean, and then that's going to take it away from other duties? Is that?
I don't know that you can say that there will be such a fundamental effect that nothing else will get done for the sake of the cannabis licensing program coming into effect. But what I can say is that there will be a small group of people who will begin to work on the issue. And as more revenue comes in, then conceivably that will be a discussion that we will have with the Board of Supervisors to determine what, if any, additional staff is going to be necessary. Is there going to be more time necessary in county council, in planning, in engineering, in code enforcement? That's probably likely. We don't know what any of that looks like at this point. So to start off, I think we're going to be able to identify a small group of people that will go across, or cut across, I should say, all of the departments who will be able to address these as we start up and as we move forward. As we have more revenue come in, then we'll get more people.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. All right, well then let's, Barbara, do you have?
We're on number 3.
3, right.
Do you want to skip that or take a motion on that one?
Well, say you skip it. Because we were trying to bring it down. Some don't want to bring it down. Just skip it.
Okay.
Well, it seemed to be consensus, but don't mess with it.
I think, yeah. Is that how everybody feels, that we'll just leave it alone?
Well, we have a lot of differences of opinion, right? Some of us want to reduce it, some of us want to put it up. So I don't think we can give them any help, really. You said 100, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I was fine with leaving it alone.
I'm fine with, I mean, we could table it that way. I'd be fine with 100 too.
I was saying 50, but
okay. So.
Well, the reason Victor had said though that it sounded like state law was going to go with 100. That's where they came up with 100 to begin with. So.
State law. Is that correct, Victor?
Well, remember, it's a draft right now, so we won't really know until the coming months.
Right, but that's what you originally
that's
said.
The inclination.
It is a draft at this point, but that's where the original 100 came from.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave it at the 100. Is everybody okay with that?
This one is set at 3 right now.
Yeah.
So you say you want to go back to the original one of 100.
Yeah,
Correct?
I do, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That,
Then it would be, it would be no on 3? It'd be no on 3, because that says 300 or less?
Well, we could just say that we want to go back to 100. We got one, two, three,
Okay.
four
Yeah.
people on
Got
there.
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's back to 100? Okay.
100, all 5 of us, huh? Okay.
No, I'm just trying to be
Is
nice.
it 5-0 to keep the original language?
Is it 4-1 or 5, Ray?
It's 4-1.
Okay,
That's
4-1.
okay, we still have a consensus, so.
Okay.
Number 4, the Board of Supervisors should consider not allowing any cultivation on parcels less than 5 acres in size by the modification of subsection D of section 7.02.080 subdivision D. And the language that's added is that no cannabis permit shall be unless the premise is 5 or more acres in size. So it's adding the requirement that that the parcel be more than 5 acres. That's the addition, that it has to be more than 5 acres.
And
So eliminate all 5,
5 acres or more in
or
size.
more?
No.
Okay, or.
Nothing less than 5, yeah. I'm
Is
okay
that
with
like
that.
a desire to have it more than 5 acres, 5 or more acres in size?
And just to add to it, Barb, it would eliminate a few of our license options, because some of the license types do fall within certain size cultivations. So it would, at least in those, it would strike a lot of those options regarding the footprint of the cultivation, just so you're aware.
Okay, so here's a planning question for you. So is this 5-acre zoning area, or is this the actual parcel of 5 acres? Because
it's
I'm in
writ-
a 5-acre parcel area, or density area, but my parcel's 1 acre and a third.
This is actual parcels, it's written
Actual
right
parcel
now.
size, okay? Clear?
That's fine.
Okay,
Yeah. Is that fine with everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
Okay.
cluster subdivision
Yeah, I don't
will
know
work.
what the licenses are, but I'm fine.
So that is a 5-0 vote in favor?
Jean,
that correct?
Is that, okay.
Next one is number 5. The Board of Supervisors shall, and this is a little bit, shall consider not allowing any cultivation on parcels more than 10 acres in size by the modification of subsection D to add the language that unless the premises is 10 acres or less in size. So basically, because there was concern that it should, that it needs to be kept away from large parcels that can be farmed. That's what, you know, if, and most of the planning commission may not feel that way, but that was the reason that was added, because the thought expressed that it should only be on smaller parcels, not on larger parcels that can be farmed.
But most of the farm parcels,
Yeah.
it's a minority. Most of it's large grazeland parcels all over the county. You're eliminating like most of the rest of your map just changed, by the way. Almost maybe only a third of this map is actually viable at all. Forget your line. You can move that purple line all over the place now.
Right. This isn't staff's recommendation. This is like just miscellaneous comments that I've heard. This is not like from staff. This is what I thought that the planning commission.
Just generally, to me, that doesn't make sense at all. If they're going to go down out into the South County area, you're going to have hundreds and thousands of acres of parceling. And it's not going to be farmed. It's going to be like grazing it's going to be grazing if they're doing anything.
Grazing or mineral, yeah.
Is
I
there a
think we can-
consensus to skip that one?
I think we can strike that one.
Yeah, and it seems like you'd have less impact out there anyway. You'd want to be out there. But that's just me.
Well,
That consensus or no?
seems to me maybe they could set up a fee schedule where, because of the logistics of getting south, where they paid maybe an additional fee based upon the mileage from Hollister.
Yeah. But they want to cut it off completely.
Well, no, that's wherever. You know what I'm saying?
But on some of the
But you're
ordinance,
60 miles to the bottom end? That's what it
You don't
is.
have a lot of internet service out there. And in the ordinance, I was calling for monitoring. That was probably one of the reasons they came with that. South County has no. You go down there, your cell phone, unless you have a satellite phone.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the internet. You have
One
no
of the-
high-speed internet out there. Nothing.
One of the, to your point, Commissioner Rodriguez, one of the likely requirements under the rules and regs will be remote 24 hours video surveillance accessible by the Sheriff's Department, Cannabis Coordinator, and others. So if there is no access, there's going to be no allowance.
Well, then they just set up a satellite service, right?
They can do it.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
have
I mean, they're going to have the money to do it with. So that doesn't limit the South County. So that kind of opened up your purple line again, too.
I'm not an investor, so I don't have that kind of thing, so I can't answer that. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so we're skipping number 5, if that's with the consensus of the Planning Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6, there was a typo, but the Board of Supervisors can considering allowing outdoor growth in certain isolated areas. I don't have developed any language for the proposal, but I wanted to find out whether the board would be in favor of outdoor growth in certain isolated areas, whatever that may be. I don't know what is considered isolated yet. But, I know that some people have raised the issue, in South County or somewhere isolated where there's no neighbors, it should be allowed outdoors. So whatever isolated means, and we'd have to flesh that out, does the Planning Commission want to allow it outdoors any place in the county? Yes or no, basically.
I need to have a sheriff in here to talk to on something like this.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
I think that would be fine if they can get the satellite thing going and it doesn't bother anybody. Why not?
I mean,
Well, I'd like to hear what the sheriff has to say on that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
She's asking us for a vote on this.
So I can
think.
skip that right now.
Yeah, let's skip that one, too.
Okay.
The Board of Supervisors should consider a 1,000-foot mailed notice requirement to neighbors prior to approval of an application.
1,000? That's not
300,000, whatever.
bigger, more.
Mail
Yeah.
notice
More?
requirement
More.
to neighbors.
2,500?
Yeah, well, this is a
Half a
county.
mile?
Application.
How big?
1,000
Like a mile?
feet.
What's the notice?
Yeah.
300 feet.
I would
Normally
say
it's
like
300
5
feet.
miles or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, then
We'll
you
send it
wouldn't,
to the state
if you have
capitol.
like 5 miles, then you couldn't do mailed notice in a lot of cases. The state law of like 25094 says if you have to mail to more than 1,000 people, you can publish in the newspaper. I think I'm quoting that section correctly. So, I mean, if there's going to be if 1,000 people or 500 people that you have to, there should be an alternative to mailed notice.
See, I'm
if
thinking
it's-
at South County. In the city, that wouldn't work at all. But
Okay.
in the South County, you have neighbors are that far apart. So
Well, this would be from parcel boundaries, I guess, neighboring parcels. So do you want to have a mailed notice requirement? And if
whatever
so,
the maximum whatever the maximum is, then we can.
1,000
Yeah,
feet sounds
I
okay.
think it's better to have more
More,
than,
yeah.
Yeah,
with something
more.
like this, yeah.
so 1,000, 2,000?
Well, it depends on, the size of the parcels and who the neighbors are, so we can't come up with a real number.
How about just considered mailed notice requirement to neighbors? And we'll leave the
Yeah.
square footage, the distance out?
We definitely want them individually mailed and not posted because it's too easy to miss that. But that's the biggest complaint I hear more than anything else as a planning commissioner is that stuff was posted in the paper and they didn't know.
Right. So the Board of Supervisors should consider A, mailed notice requirement to neighbors prior to approval of an application.
Right.
How many people would be in favor of that?
I would,
We're all-
yeah.
Is that 5-0? Yay.
Right.
See, we can agree.
What?
It's
No
it's
distance.
left open.
No distance yet.
Would depend on the,
For to come back was 300 feet.
8, the Board of Supervisors should, another typo, should consider the inclusion of an appeal process to the Planning Commission and then to the Board of Supervisors or hearing officer of decisions of the Cannabis Coordinator regarding an application.
that one, I definitely think we should take out Planning Commission because we should not be involved in that stuff at all. That's nothing to do with
That's-
planning. I would
There's
say
more
no.
legal
Well, no,
stuff.
this is more, I think, for the neighbors. If the neighbors have a problem or the neighbors want to be able to express their opinion, it has to be able to go somewhere.
It's an appeal process to the planning commission. Why did it should just go to the supervisor? Well,
Yeah.
that's my
It
thing.
runs like this. So everything that happens within the planning boundaries come in here first, and you have to have an appeal group if there's a disconnect. So let's say somebody comes in, they have a project, and we deny it. Then it goes to the supervisors in, 10 days or whatever, and then the Board of Supervisors ends up voting on it. So I see where this is coming from. I'm not sure I want to be part of it, but I see where it's coming from.
I think the public needs to have somewhere they can appeal it to.
Yeah, and that's really, this is the format. So, like it or not, I think we kind of
just-
almost have to do that.
Should just go to the supervisors? Because they've
Well,
had
and
the
then it
final.
moves to supervisors. If let's say we deny it, then it goes to supervisors and they hear it. And they're
Yeah, but-
basically the
I just-
appeal board.
Point of clarification, we're talking about decisions of the coordinator. He's not going to, what kind of decisions? I mean, if they're land use kind of decisions, but if he makes a decision that somebody shouldn't get a permit and somebody else should, what's that got to do with what we do?
No, I'm
That
not.
doesn't make sense.
I feel strongly about this, Jean, but I'm talking about the neighbors.
No.
I'm talking about not the person getting
Okay,
the
so
permit.
so let's add that in there. If there's a public complaint by
Right.
the neighbors, then I'm fine with that. But
Right.
if it's just the cannabis guy doing something with that,
and that's not what I meant by this. I meant by,
All right,
you know,
let's
the
clarify.
neighbors have a
Yeah, I'm
problem.
fine with that too.
Yeah.
Barbara, you following our
Yeah, the Board of Supervisors should consider the inclusion of an appeal process to member of the public
Yeah, or from
affected
from a member of the
From a
public
member
to
of
the
the
planning
public.
commission.
from a member of the public
Yeah,
Or
neighbor,
from a neighbor.
public.
or
Mostly be a
from a
neighbor.
neighbor,
From-
right.
Not for
from
just one neighbor, maybe a couple of neighbors, so we don't have everybody complaining.
from a neighboring
Couple of neighboring,
from a neighboring property owner
like to have the
affected
ordinance.
affected by the application.
Right. That's
But it should be a couple of neighbors, like the noise ordinance.
Two or more neighbors?
I
Yes,
think
I
just
think so.
one,
I think two or more.
Robert, the reason I say just one is because a lot of times people won't put their name out there. If they're getting
But a lot
one
of times you're going to
neighbor-
have the same neighbor complain over and over. We had that in the past on the noise ordinance.
Then we just address it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's an actual, like on the noise one, there was an actual violation, and so it has to be addressed.
Yeah. But
I mean, if
the
there's
same.
only one neighbor that's affected,
There's more than one neighbor, so.
well, no, but I'm saying with this, if there's only one neighbor that's affected, they have the right to go through the process, I believe.
Not sure why we're involved in this appeal process when we're not involved in the issuance to the permit. You have nothing to do with it.
But we're just giving them feedback so they can consider it.
That?
We're just giving the supervised feedback.
Don't you believe that there should be some appeal for a neighbor?
Well, but I don't think it's to this commission, is my point. We didn't have anything to do with the issuance of the permit.
Okay, then who should it go to?
Well, the board of supervisors, whoever issues it.
Okay, so then it goes to the Board of Supervisors and they deny, then who appeals the Board of Supervisors?
It would
The court?
Well, they got to go to the court.
See, we just helped that process by taking it to us, so then it can go to the supervisors for
Yeah,
appeal.
we just made it two processes. Mark and I say no, you guys say
Yeah, but
Well,
I don't
that's
know why
because we're using a
be involved
process,
at
we're
all.
doing that process currently with everything else.
So I hear
So,
That doesn't make it
but
necessary. This is
we're-
a very unique
Three no's.
situation.
3 no's. Take out the planning commission. Does anybody,
Well,
does anybody want to have it appealed directly to the Board of Supervisors?
if we just
That's,
appeal it
that's
directly
it,
to the Board of
appeal it
Supervisors,
directly
just
to
take the planning
supervisors.
commission out. Is
That's
everybody
what I
okay
was
with that?
suggesting.
Okay,
do
everybody's
that?
fine with that.
Okay,
How many-
directly to the soups.
How many people want to have it appealed to the Board of
Exactly.
Supervisors?
I mean,
Everyone that want to go.
Everybody agrees. that it
Everyone
just-
agrees, it goes
just
to the
go-
soup.
Just go to the soups.
Okay, 5-0. And last but not least, The Board of Supervisors should consider developing an overlay zone.
Yes.
Yeah. Specific zoning, specific plan.
Overlay zone,
Yeah.
is that fine with everyone?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come up with a good one, that
And
one.
then they can figure it out, and if they need some help figuring that part of it out and the map part of it out, then they can bring it back to us and we can help out.
So Board of Supervisors should consider developing a specific zoning and/or an overlay zone.
Correct.
And how many people are in favor of that?
I am.
I think we all were.
We're with it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're on it.
I'm against it.
4-1.
Just more work.
4-1.
Okay. Were there any other major issues that you'd like to add to this list?
One thing well, we're not on that anymore, so it's going to the soups, but I was going to say if we had to appeal it, it should be on a side meeting, special meeting, something like that, but it's going to the soups.
It's going directly to the supervisors, yeah.
Madam Chair, if it would be, I know with the 5-acre restriction and then some feedback on a potential overlay and so on, this question may be void, but can we get some direction on the southern boundary? It sounds like there was an elimination of that, if I'm not mistaken.
There was a what?
An elimination?
Yeah,
of
all
the-
in favor of that purple line going away, say aye.
Yeah, I don't see any justification.
I don't
for
see
it
any
from what
point
I've
in
heard
any
so
other.
far.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that we said, though, that we would want to hear from the sheriff before we took the
Well,
line
I'd like
away.
I'd like to hear from the sheriffs.
Unless someone's going to set up a satellite over there. I mean, it's just for monitoring.
I think you mentioned that you wanted to talk to the sheriff about outdoor cultivation.
Yeah.
That and the line.
That
going
and the
away.
line?
Yes.
Got it. So I can't answer the question on outdoor cultivation on behalf of the sheriff. I'd be happy to do that because he's told me this multiple times. He is 100% opposed to any outdoor cultivation.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine with-
But regarding the line, we could certainly chat with him about that.
Yeah, because if
Didn't
they
say
have
I
the
disagree with
technology to respond, that's one thing, but still having the bodies, I mean, that depends on how many staff we have.
Well, the helicopter's going to be
Okay, now-
expensive for this, you know?
Barbara, do you need basically a motion to take this forward?
Yes, please. To adopt the resolution as amended, the one that was presented with the alternative, the Exhibit A, the newest motion as amended with the
Okay,
notations.
read into the record what you want, and then we'll get you a motion, okay? Barbara is making the motion for us, so we make sure we do it right.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes,
A lot of pressure, Barbara.
Yeah.
A lot of pressure.
but I'm not going to read each vote again.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
Just the motion, the way you need it to stand in the record, so we're all legal.
A motion to adopt a resolution that was passed out at the Planning Commission, recommending that the Board of Supervisors adopt an ordinance adding, well, let me start over. Motion to consider adoption of the resolution that was presented to the Planning Commission, as amended during the Planning Commission's vote, which contains both the recommended action to the, of the Planning Commission and also presents the points of consideration set forth in Exhibit A.
Okay, and who would like to make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
All right. Do I have a second to the motion? I'll second the motion. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So ordered.
4-1?
No, I think it's 5-0 that I know of.
No, I was abstaining because I don't think I understood what you just said.
Oh, okay.
So I decided not to vote for it.
Okay, so you're just, you want to abstain, though? You're not voting no?
Right.
Okay, Okay.
Thank you very much.
okay. All right, is there any other business tonight before the Planning Commission, or I will accept a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Aye.